We'll wait for some more attendees to come in before we start. I'll start in a couple minutes.
Good afternoon to those who've joined. We're just giving a couple more minutes for people to find their way down the hall and into the room. So please just hang tight for a few more moments. Thank you. Welcome again to those who've joined. We're just giving a couple moments for people to find their way to the room. So thank you for joining, and we will be starting momentarily. Thank you.
Would you like me to begin now, Kay?
Let's go ahead and get started. Looks like our door isn't revolving quite as fast now. So thank you.
You're welcome, hon. Good morning and afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Melinda Martirosian. I'm with the PTAC, also known as an Apex Accelerator. And I have the pleasure of leading the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would like you all to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. And it is my pleasure also to introduce Kay. And she will be taking over, and she's our chairman. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Melinda. Thank you.
Welcome.
And thank you to each of you who has registered and then got re-registered. And it was a little bit of an adventure this time. We had been excited and looked forward to hosting something in person, but realizing it is fourth quarter and we are still, some of us, figuring out where all of our travel funds and budgets are. So with that in mind, I will lead us into kind of a idea of what's going to come up in March. We are planning to be in person in Tacoma area, and we will coincide with the Alliance event. So when you see it's time to register for Alliance, it will be time to register for the next DoD Regional Council event. Now, I want to take this moment to introduce our board members. We have Mr. Michael Gilbert. He is the vice chair. We have, Mr. David Walls, who is our secretary. We have Mr. James Glenn, who is our treasurer. And I am the chairperson. And I'm sharing this information as well as to encourage some thoughts as to who might be interested in participating in the next session. Now, we also have supportive members. We have Ms. Melinda and Ms. Jackie, who are instrumental in keeping things going, as well as Mr. Jeremy, Ms. Vanessa, and Ms. Mary Jo. They do a lot of the work in the background to help make these events be successful. So thank you to all of your strong support for all of this. Let's see, I'll take a moment make sure you look around, see where your exits are, know where your restrooms are. Some of the breaks will be as you need them. We won't necessarily have a lot of breaks during this event, so you'll be on your own for that. Let's see, we've got an interesting event lined up with legislative updates, the small business program compliance reviews, the small business professional handbook overview, and the greening of government contracting. I'm really excited to hear what each of our speakers has to present today and to share with us. Let's see, let me look over my list real quick. Again, I do want to say thank you so much. I know some of us have registered initially through Eventbrite and then things got changed. I really do appreciate everyone's flexibility and ability to accommodate the changes and supporting our virtual online event today. This is wonderful. Without further ado,
Wait, Kate.
Yes, I better.
One more thing, because I forgot to mention it.
Mhm.
We need to let you know that if you raise your hand, we can then unmute you so you can ask your question, or you can ask your questions in Q&A.
And it helps if you ask in Q&A because that feeds directly into the panel, as well as it keeps track of the questions for us. Sometimes if we ask questions in chat, we may miss them, or they may get lost, going down the chat as others ask. So please do, if you can locate your Q&A button, it's on the bottom of the screen. On my screen, it's about the 4th tab over. So it should be kind of near there for you as well, I would think. Also, please feel free to use the hand raise if you've got a question you want to voice over the meeting. I'm excited to pass the mic over to Mr. Randall Miller out of Alaska with the Small Business Administration. He's going to provide us with the most recent and interesting legislative updates. He's got a fair bit of knowledge to share with us, and he's also a wealth of information. So please, if you have some questions, this is your time to ask those questions. So Randall, are you ready to take it away? Uh-oh. There we go. Except I see you're still muted. There we go. Thank
Hi.
you.
Yes, I am. I'm sorry, just a little bit of logistical clicking. So I am Randy Miller. I am one of your friendly neighborhood Area 6 PCRs. We hopefully most of you know who your PCR is and what we do. Elevator speech is our job is to get as much of the federal contracting dollars into the hands of small business as practical. And there's a lot of ways we do that, but integral to this group is working with the buying offices on set asides in what is being set aside for small business. A lot of you work with Yuri Dyson. She's done this update several times. Our other PCRs is Tuan Doan, who's down in San Diego, and Kimberly Tripp, who some of you may know from her Corps of Engineer days, has been brought on. She's up here in Alaska also, but we're more, the PCR jobs, what we do hasn't changed, but who we support has changed a little bit. Whereas when I was hired in 2018, I was all of Alaska. I had all of Alaska and very little other than backing up my other PCRs in other areas. Well, now I still have all of Alaska generally. Kim has one or two agencies, but I also have agencies in the Pacific Northwest. Hi, Dave. I have one in San Diego, NEFAC Southwest down in San Diego. I have Space Force out of LA. So because of losing people to retirements and moving on to bigger and better positions, we are not as geographically based as we used to be. So I am going to do the legislative regulatory update. If we have questions throughout, please ask. Don't be afraid to pop in and ask while we're talking on subjects. Also, the slides will be made available to you. I have hidden many of the slides that are in the stock presentation. I don't generally talk about pending legislative action because oftentimes it doesn't pass. And to me, it's just confusing to say, oh, we're talking about doing this. And then you get that in your head as a small business specialist, small business professional, and then it never comes to fruition. And to me, it's just confusing. I'm going to talk one or two very specific legislative actions that are pending just because I think they're of interest. But anyway, if you want to see everything, get the slideshow. And also the slideshow has links. So these are hyperlinks in it that you won't be able to click on through this presentation, but they will be available. I'm sorry, but they are available on the slideshow itself. If my presentation at any time is not showing or was not advancing, please let me know. So NDAA for 2023, a few of the interesting things here is it actually codified the scorecard and it added the set aside data to the SBA scorecard. Congressional reports on consolidated contracts. So as you hopefully well know, information on contracts that are getting consolidated are being provided to SBA now, so we can put those reports together. The DoD Mentor Protege program has been made permanent. It creates a statutory DHS Mentor Protege program, and most importantly to a lot of the small businesses, it does authorize DoD contract mods to address the economic inflation that has been so impactful in the last 2 years. SBIR Extension Act extends the SBIR and SIDR programs into fiscal year 2025. A lot of this isn't really too interesting to us. It's more interesting to the businesses themselves. It does require each agency to establish a due diligence program on foreign influence, and the businesses must report this foreign ties now. and increases minimum performance standards. All right, so executive actions. We all know, I think, of the raised SPB spending up to 12%, which is going to 15 eventually. This was done by on the memo to make it actually effective, that our FY23 goals of 23% for SPB. It directs us to build diversity and resilience in the federal supplier base. And there's another slide that addresses a little bit of what's going on to do that. And the intent is to lower barriers to entry into the SPB businesses. So these are the two that I was talking about: the supplier dashboard, base dashboard, and the government-wide procurement equity tool. The equity tool does require a shoot, I'm trying to think, I'm sorry, what the login. It's a GSA data decision one. You have to have a max.gov login to access that one. They're pretty good. The supplier database dashboard lets you go through and drill down to see what types of businesses that we're using in the government sector, and you can drill down into just all kinds of stuff. The government-wide procurement equity tool has more business. It's more useful for market research on finding vendors that are active, vendors that are still maybe haven't gotten contracts. And then there's a contract map view by geographic region, and there's a contract list view too. So it's actually pretty helpful for market research.
We have a question from Connie.
Go ahead.
Got it.
I think that question might be from Priscilla. Connie is my colleague.
Okay.
And that was an accidental raise of my hand, but for some reason I'm not seeing anything on my screen. Is there something I need to do on this end? I'm not seeing the slides whatsoever.
Hi, this is Jeremy. Can you try disconnecting and reconnecting? It might be just your Zoom connection right now.
Thank you.
And we'll take just a little bit of this. Is anybody else not seeing the slides?
There's one more question from Donna Frazier. Can you recommend the best website federal resource we could use to follow proposed pending final rules to the FAR?
Yes, the Federal Register is right there. It's kind of highlighted, but if you go to federalregister.gov, you can actually sign up to be notified when things are out there. That's the best one. That's where the proposed rules, the FIRE rules are. And if you get the slides, you can click on any one of these hyperlinks and it will take you to that specific rule depending on what it is. But that is the authoritative place if you want to know, hey, is this really in effect? When was it put into effect? But so federalregister.gov. All right, so the final rule that was effective in May for size and socioeconomic status determination. So if there's a size protest as an example, and the SBA finds that the business is not small in that NAICS code, the business is required to update their status in SAM no later than 2 days after they're notified of the determination. If they don't do it, SBA now has the ability and authority and mandate to update it for them. The other thing that goes along with that is if the business is notified that their socioeconomic or size has been deemed not small and they have submitted proposals, they must notify the agencies that they submitted those proposals, or if they have a pending with those proposals. NMR waivers, this is one of my subject matter expert areas that if anybody has questions on NMR, bring it up. I hopefully will be able to answer it. If not, I could dig in and find. But so this final rule, it just puts in writing essentially what the SBA standing has always been, that an NMR waiver request is only required to reach 50% for small business plus waived items. So an example of that is if you're buying $100,000 worth of screws and they're manufactured by a small business, and then you're buying $1,000 worth of washers to go with those, there's no need for a non-manufacturer waiver, because 50% by dollars of the items you're buying are being manufactured for small business. It was never the SBA's intent that everything had to be provided by small business under the non-manufacturer rule. Non-manufacturer rule is entirely, that's its own 45-minute presentation, but if anybody has specific questions here, please feel free to ask.
Excuse me for just a moment. We have technical difficulties. We're not able to see your slides right now by all of us.
Yeah, I think you need to just reshare. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Okay, thank you.
So it's working now?
Perfect.
Okay, I may have network issues on this end because I didn't do anything different. So it may be if they disappear again, let me know and we'll take another pause. So that NMR part was just the middle bullet on this slide. The prohibition of competitions that require multiple certifications. This is another longstanding SBA policy that we have had to put into writing. So what that is saying is, with a socioeconomic set aside, you cannot stack them. You cannot solicit and say this is an 8A solicitation, but you must have multiple certifications, or this is an 8A and a HUD zone requirement. Same thing, you cannot do a service disabled set aside and say people must be women owned at the same time. I think that's pretty clear. And the same goes for multiple award contracts. If you're doing GSA or if you're doing an agency multiple award contract, if that contract was solicited full and open or as a small business set aside, you may do a further set aside on those contracts. You can go out to GSA or an agency contract and say, well, this was a small business set aside, but there are 3 service disabled veterans on there, so we're going to set this order aside for service disabled veterans. 80 WASB HUB zone service disabled vet cannot be JV partner for more than 1 JV per contract. So that being said, an example would be on a GSA schedule. You cannot be a JV partner on 2 awards on the same contract. So you can't be a JV partner as a WASB on one and either another WASB or any other category. Again, I think that's pretty clear. If not, please let me know. We can talk about that a little further. So the 8A, on 8A on unrestricted multiple award contracts, I just talked about that to some extent. If there's a GSA like GSA stars, and there's GSA not stars, on a GSA unrestricted or an agency unrestricted, and you do a sole source award to an 8A on that multiple award contract, you must offer that to SBA, and SBA will verify that the firm is eligible. And again, if it's below SAT, it's a eligibility request rather than a formal offer letter. And then you can use the Federal Supply Schedule ordering procedures. There's another one, there's another nuance to that that I think will come later, but you can no longer, and this is a fairly new rule, but you can no longer, if a firm is no longer 8A eligible, they're not eligible for 8A sole source awards on multiple award contracts. So if you have an 8A set aside contract and you're doing it competitive, everybody that's on that award would be eligible to bid. If an 8A business is no longer, if they graduated the 8A program or otherwise left the 8A program, they would not be eligible for a sole source award. BPAs are also subject to consolidation and bundling. Those, if BPAs are being consolidated and or bundled, SBA has to be notified. On subcontracting plans going ahead, overhead costs will be included. In the past, it's been the option for the vendor to either include overhead costs or not in their subcontracting calculations. Going forward, it's not going to be optional. They will be included. Limitations on subcontracting. And this is a final rule. A contracting officer cannot give a satisfactory positive past performance to a business that fails to comply with limitations on subcontracting, unless a determination is approved. So what that unless determination approved means is if there is a good faith effort determination that the company did in good faith try to comply with their limitations on subcontracting and matters without what beyond their control affected it, that's the only time where a past performance can be satisfactory. And that's overall, not just in the small business category. Okay, some of this is not a lot of interest to contracting staff and small business staff. It's more interest to the vendors and our BOSs. The business activity targets, commonly called BATs. The SBA will consider extenuating circumstances, offers on 8A procurement. So the BAT is throughout the 9 years of businesses is in the 8A program, their ratio of 8A to non-8A contracts changes. As they progress through the program, they should be getting more non-8A contracts than 8A contracts. And that's what the BATs are. And this is just saying that there's a probation program. If they're not meeting their BATs, they kind of get on probation and can't get sole source awards and some other things. What this is saying is that if there's extenuating circumstances, it's not a hard and cut fast rule about percentages any longer. The individual retirement account exemptions for economic disadvantage. There's again, this is within SBA, not really a concern to the contracting staff. The bona fide place of business. This one is. It is current through FY23. There is all intent to extend the bona fide place of business. The intent for SBA was to get that announcement out earlier than we have at this point. But unless things change, you can expect that there will not be a bona fide place of business requirement for competitive construction contracts. Offer acceptance. This is another area it's semantics. So the formal offer acceptance letter is not done or not required under SAT. You still need to check for eligibility. So if a contracting officer is doing an 8A award below SAT, they still need to send to the district office a eligibility determination. You can still use your format for your offer letter if you like. I always did. I just found it was easier just to send the letter. If not, you can just send an email that says, we would like to use this company for this requirement. It's this approximate this dollar amount. It's for this. It's this NAICS code. And basically, instead of doing a full review, they just take a quick look to make sure that that 8A is eligible for 8A awards. And then this is where it's only active 8A firms can receive sole source orders. So we're used to a 5-year contract that gets awarded, and the whatever status that company was at the time that they qualified for the award continues throughout the entire program, or throughout the entire contract. What this is saying is, if an 8A firm is no longer eligible for 8A, they cannot receive sole source orders. They could still receive competitive orders under that contract, but not sole source. Inflation for size standards that added 13% to revenue-based size standards across the board. There are other size standard specific changes that were made. Again, not really of interest to the contracting officer or the small business specialist, more of interest to the small businesses themselves, whether they qualify again if they were just barely over the previous standards. So to qualify for social economic disadvantage, companies or individuals' net worth has gone from 750 to 850. The gross suggested income has go up. The total assets has raised, and of more of interest to the contracting community's dollar limit for all 8A contracts awarded has increased from 100 million. From 100 million to 168.5. 2022 NAICS size standards, SBA's finally, as of September 2022, accepted or reviewed and accepted the size standards, the 2022 NAICS, and have the size standards attached to all of them. There's 111 new industry categories, and there are a lot of new WASB program NAICS codes. I think we added 177 codes. It's up to, I think it's in the 700s, but there are a lot of new WASB codes. So if you had things in the past that you considered doing under the WASB or ED-WASB program that were not in the NAICS codes, double check to see if maybe they are now. Size standards, again, this is, there's a lot of increases in the size standards, more of interest to SBA themselves and the businesses than to contracting staff and small business professionals. Veteran-owned, search-disabled, veteran-owned certification is now being done by SBA. Much of the policies that were done under the vet cert, under the VA program, are still valid. I've heard really, really good input from vendors. We know the WASB program suffered problems during rollout, and it still can be a lengthy process to get WASB certified. The SBD program has been much, much better. So for one thing they did, the folks that were certified under the VA, they continue to be certified. They just rolled over, and they were extended for 1 year from whatever their expiration, their recertification date was going to be, to they got extended for a year to get them in the new system. I've had feedback directly from vendors that the process is very quick. We had a vendor call me early in the very beginnings of the program, and he was having problems. No matter what he did, the drop down for his position in the business, he couldn't fill it in, whether it was CEO or owner or whatever. So I had him call the help desk. He called them. They said just use the other browser. He was using Edge, and they said use Chrome or vice versa. I asked him to stay in touch with me and let me know how it went and if they took care of him and how long it took to get certified. He was certified in a week and a half. After they told him to use the other drop down, he was successful in getting his submission And again, in a week and a half, they came back and approved him, and he was certified as service disabled vet. So that's a success story that I really like sharing, that they have rolled this program out right. So to be clear on this one, certification is required for set aside or sole source or a vet, most VA contracts. Self-certification is still valid, and if a vendor is self-certified as a service disabled veteran-owned business, as of this point, the contracting office still gets credit for that under any award, whether it's full and open or a small business set aside. They're just not eligible for sole source or set asides to compete if they're not SBA certified. And that's holds true across the board for all programs that have a self-certification. Okay, JV, this one is of interest. The small business can use past performance from a joint venture provided they work on the joint venture's contracts. So if a vendor submits past performance from a JV that they participated on, they need to show how they performed, what work they performed. They can't just say, hey, this joint venture, we did this as a joint venture. They need to say, we did this and our participation was, how it applies to the instant acquisition. Small business can use past performance from a first tier subcontract to go after a prime contract. So if they were first tier subcontractor on a prior contract, they can also use that past performance as a prime competing on a new prime contract. To actually get past performance in CPARs, the subcontractor has to request it from the prime contractor. The prime should provide that rating within 15 days within CPARs. Now, that being said, the subcontractor has to be registered in SAM to make that happen. And most of them are now, but, and that's the one difference where it used to be the subcontractor did not have to be registered. They do need to be registered in SAM at this time, but there's an option to register as a subcontractor, and that's all they're doing is getting an EIN number. They don't have to put in all their other stuff. Why they would do that if they ever want to be a prime contractor, they probably don't, but if all they want to do is sub, they can register in SAM with just saying I'm a subcontractor and not enter all their all the other data into SAM. And they must request it within 30 days after the period of performance. All right, FAR regulatory actions. So this one is big. If anybody out there is doing or contemplating 8A contracts beyond 5 years, the new rule as of February of this year limits options past the 5th year. So within 120 days of the 5th year of an option to be exercised beyond the 5th year, contracting officers must have the 8A businesses recertified. If they're no longer eligible in the 8A program, as in active in the 8A program, the exercise the option cannot be exercised. The other thing that goes along with this is if you're just a long-term contract, say a 7-year contract, an 80 contract maybe without options because it's not funded, 8A vendors that are no longer active will not be eligible for orders beyond 5 years. So kind of keep that in mind if you're doing 8A. Some of those market research, are these businesses going to be 8A if they're in their first year or two of the program? They may be able to perform for 7 years, but if they're in the last year or two of the program, they would be good for 5 years on a 5-year contract, even if they graduate after submitting their proposal. But after the 5th year, they would no longer be eligible. If there's
We have-
questions on this, you can either
Yes,
ask.
we do. We have
Okay.
questions, if you don't mind, hun.
Sure, absolutely. Let's hear them. There's
Is
one
there,
that I
okay.
can't answer, but if it doesn't come up, we won't worry about it.
okay, is there still the requirement that the prime cannot require the use of SAM FAR 52.219-9 C2 / FAR 52.219-8 E3, even with the past performance requirement?
So yes and no. The way they got around that is the fact that the vendors can register in SAM only for the purpose of getting an EIN number. So that restriction is still there. They cannot force a vendor to do a complete SAM registration. But if a vendor wants to be a subcontractor, they will have to register in SAM just for the purpose of getting an EIN.
Okay, and I have two raised hands. One's from Priscilla.
And I keep saying EIN, IEN. Sorry.
Can you let Priscilla ask her question, please?
Actually, Jamie raised the same question that I had a question on.
Okay, Priscilla, thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have one more that has a question. It's not showing me a name.
I think Priscilla still has her hand out. There, did it go away?
No more hands.
Oh. I'm surprised you don't have questions on that one. The essential subcontractor rule does apply to all the socioeconomic programs. And then size has always been determined at initial offer that includes price. Now, if it doesn't require price evaluation, say on an A&E contract, the size is determined at time of initial offer. It no longer, the price caveat is no longer there. If the solicitation does not require a price evaluation. We all know that I think we all know, I should not say that, but WASB certification is through SBA now. There's still some glitches in SAM. So if you're doing market research and a business says they're WASB and you look them up in SAM and you don't see that, and in DSBS is the authoritative for WASB. You must go to DSBS. If you have an offer or an apparent winner that says they're WASB, but it doesn't appear there, ask them to send you their certificate. If they provide the SBA certificate that they've been provided, then they're good to go. You just put that in the contract file and use that. There are still, I think, a few firms out there that think they're registered WASB that are not actually SBA certified, but they're not aware of the program. If you run into any WASB issues, contact your PCR and we'll help you work through it. Joint ventures. This is for a joint venture between men and protege to qualify as small for socioeconomic program, meaning if there's an approved SBA mentor protege program between a large and a small business, all the socioeconomic categories that the mentor is, or the protege is eligible for, that joint venture is eligible for. Agencies must consider past performance of each party to a joint venture if the joint venture is not able to demonstrate its own. That's saying if the joint venture itself hasn't done anything, the agencies must go back to the individual members of the joint venture, and if they have past performance that applies, you have to consider that. You have to put that as part of the evaluation. You cannot require the joint venture itself to have past performance. SBA does not form joint venture approval for competitive 8A awards, but it still determines 8A participant eligibility. So that means if you get a joint venture on an 8A award, you still go to SBA, the conjugate district office, and request the eligibility that they are 8A eligible. And what they're going to do is they're going to go and look at the joint venture and look at the 8A participant and just verify that they are currently eligible for 8A awards. Zone, two keys here is that it puts in writing that HUD set asides and sole social awards are authorized for use under the SAT. The temp domain residency, takeaway from here with the temp domain residency is that the contracting officer probably at the end of the contract would request that the contractor certify whether they're still have the residency percentage or not. It's differs if they have HUD zone contracts or not on what they're required to do. Well, construction. This is equitable adjustments. So the agencies must publish their information about definition of equitable adjustments, meaning they must say when and how much, not only know if it's how much, but they basically how long it took to definitize actions. Then they must collect data on time required to definitive change orders for construction contracts. So this is a new change that pay attention to when undefinitive actions actually get priced. Superconsider, this is a proposed rule. I want to highlight that. We've got, I think, two proposed rules that I kept on here. Something that's in the works is the data rights protections being changed from 4 years to 20 years. Currently, superconsider data rights is 4 years. There is a proposed rule to extend that for 20 years. Phase 3 sole source awards without having to do further justification. In some instances, the phase 2 sole source awards may be awarded without justification. And this is another proposed rule. Now, the reason I kept this on here is because this is basically just putting something into writing. It's clarifying that the COC program is not applicable to 8A sole source awards. So if you're working on an 8A sole source and you decide that as a contracting officer, and you decide the vendor, there's a responsibility issue, you don't need to submit a COC. You just go back to the district office and say, we want to rescind our offer, or we want to rescind our offer letter because we're either going to do an outside 8A program or we're going to go to a different vendor. If you determine that there's a responsibility issue on a sole source 8A, you just go to a different vendor. There's no reason to do a COC on it. The other things with the 8A program, and this is already actually in place, agency determines that a procurement for previously procured under 8A is a new requirement, not subject to SBA release requirements. Basically, and the wording changing a little bit to say instead of notified, that will coordinate with. So in the future, it won't be, hey, we've determined this is new work. This is work that wasn't, some of this work was in the 8A program. It's new work. And rather than SBA having a few days to come back and say, no, we want to take a second look at it, it's going to be, the word notify is getting changed. That's it. And then if you procure follow-on 8A procurement through a limited competition vehicle, if you've done a sole source or a competitive 8A, and you decide you want to change it to a GSA contract, you have to talk to SBA about it. It's not normally, it's not is normally just accepted and okay, but you can't just go and do it without talking to SBA. Okay, so 8A program. So how many, this is not a good venue for show of hands, but have heard about the Ultimate Services Corporation lawsuit under the 8A program? There's been a high level of interest on it. Things are changing. But right now, there's really no change for agency contracting. Keep doing your 8A programs just like you've always done them. Keep awarding 8A awards. Keep doing just exactly the same. What's happening is the vendors, so entity-owned 8As, as in ANCs, NHOs, tribal-owned, there's no change. They're good to go. There's nothing, if you're doing an award to an ANC, nothing is going to have to, whoops, sorry, go back. Nothing is going to change whatsoever. Some of the individually owned firms will have to do a further social disadvantage determination, not determination. They're going to have to demonstrate their social disadvantage. So if they have not already done so, many of them have, SBA is excuse me, is working on contact with those doing it. If you have an award for an individually owned 8A program, when it is sent to the district office for either excuse me, an eligibility determination or for the acceptance letter, SBA is going to look and see have they done this yet. If not, part of the 5 days the SBA has to turn around that offer letter. They're going to SBA will contact the vendor and work them through the process of doing the excuse me, social disadvantage, the demonstration of social disadvantage. So whatever rumors you've heard about the 8A program being put on hold or anything else, no, continue to use the 8A program just like you always have. This one was an addition, my addition to this slide. This is not a part of the slide deck. It is kind of a daily moving target, but this is the excuse me, the status as of now. So that's all I have. Do we have questions?
There's one question. It is there any perceived risk of protest under new contract awards under the 8A program in light of the latest ruling?
I think it's highly unlikely because the ruling is that basically the socioeconomic disadvantage couldn't be determined just by race, is essentially what the ruling was. So SBA is addressing the ruling. They're have determined, again, the ANCs, if you're warranted an ANC, there's not a problem. If somebody were to protest saying, well, I don't think they're an eligible 8A, first of all, sole source is not protestable. Oh, excuse me. If you do protest on a competitive 8A based on this, SBA would just turn around and say, no, here they demonstrate the social disadvantage, and so no, go away. So is there a perceived risk of any perceived risk of protest? There's always, the perceived risk of a protest. If a protest is made, I think it's highly unlikely it would be sustained. So the end of the what to take is to continue your 8A program just like you always have. Good. 11:54. Again, any other small business questions? Small business questions? Thank you for your time.
And before you go, I do see one more question that popped up in here.
Okay.
Are you anticipating any regulatory changes upcoming that will impact prime contractors other than small businesses and SBA reporting?
There is, I believe,
Got to dust off that crystal ball, right?
actually, that's some of the slides that I had hidden. Let me see real quick. Don't see anything that's going to increase the reporting load for prime contractors, for large business prime contractors. So there is one that I talked about, and it was that there is reporting for prime. No, so I don't see anything further that's pending, that's waiting on votes or anything that would significantly
We have another question too.
Go ahead, Melinda.
Okay, as a follow-up, do you have a crystal ball to know when FAR 52.219-9 will be updated to include past performance for small businesses and indirects in subcontracting goals for contracts over 7.5 million?
Well, if it's anything like the limitations on subcontracting, that was, I think, 7 years. My crystal ball says between 2 and 10 years. I don't know.
Gotta love those crystal balls, right? Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the information. I
Excuse me.
think this was tremendously valuable. There were nuggets all over the place and some really great big ticket information. So thank you, thank you.
We have one more question,
Okay, let's get one more.
but
in
I'm
there.
not
Go
sure
ahead,
if
Linda.
this is a repeat or not, because did we answer the question from Garrett Slate?
What's the question real quick?
Are you anticipating any regulatory changes upcoming that will impact prime contractors, OT, SB, and SBA reporting?
SBA reporting, yes, I kind of missed the SBA reporting part of that. But if you're talking specifically what prime contractors are required to report, nothing significant.
All righty. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I have to say, for those who have questions that will come up later, I have found Mr. Miller to be incredibly approachable and willing to answer questions if I fired him off to him. So I hope that, being part of this training session, if you have a question and you need some help, please reach out to Mr. Miller. He's truly been very approachable and very willing to share information. So thank you so much for participating. Okay. And boy, and he's keeping us right on time. I can't hardly believe it. So thank you again. And we're going to get ready to roll into our next session with Dr. Sunny Hatcher and Ms. Jamie Como. I want to thank you both for joining our DoD Pacific Northwest Regional Council event. It is so nice to have each of you here. This topic has come up a number of times, and the information that you have is very sought after and anxious to be received. We've talked about this before, and I'm just excited that you are available to share this training with the audience today. Let's see, I'm going to let each of you kind of tell a little bit more about yourself so the audience can get a better feel for who you are and where you're coming from. I'll go ahead and pass the torch. Dr. Sunny, here you go.
All right, thank you for that warm welcome, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Sunny Hatcher. I am the Assistant Director for the DCMA Small Business Compliance Group. Most of you should be familiar with us in some way, form, or fashion. We conduct audits on the large prime contractors subcontracting program. And so most of you probably have received a visit or a notification letter from us in some way, form, or fashion in the past or in the near future. However, I oversee that group. And so today we're happy to be here with you today to share information on the DCMA Small Business Compliance Group capabilities. So joining me today, of course, is my esteemed colleague, my team lead, Ms. Jamie Como, who you will hear from shortly. And so while, before I pass it to her, I'm gonna go through our agenda for today. And before I get on the agenda, I also sit as the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council Chair. And so I want to put a shameless plug in there for the regional councils to reiterate how important these regional councils are. So please continue to support your local regional council so that we can continue to show the value that they are providing both for government and industry. So again, please make sure that you are supporting your local regional council. Next slide, please. So there may be a short delay in the slide changing. Nevertheless, that's why we always have a backup ready. So our agenda and purpose today, of course, will be to provide you information as it relates to things surrounding the compliance review. So some of what we are doing today, we're going to talk about the subcontractor small business compliance mission, as well as talk about some of the core functions, pre-award subcontractor plan support, also post-award responsibilities. And we're going to talk about some best practices, and then of course we're going to give you some points of contact. Again, my team lead, Ms. Jamie Como, is joining me, and she will take the lead on the majority of this training and information today. Our next slide was simply some of the things that we actually do. So Jamie, if you're listening, if you could kind of like take your slides down and repost them, because some people are saying they can't see them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, they seem to be getting stuck.
Yeah,
so-
because I was running them the whole time. I'll try again. Sorry about that, guys.
Hey, Ms. Como, this is Jeremy. I think what happened is you didn't share the full screen version of your presentation. So if you wanted to, full screen the presentation and then go Alt Tab over to your Zoom and then share the full screen.
Does that work?
There we go.
Perfect.
Looks
So go to
great. Thank you.
Yeah, go to that third slide, Jamie, please. Next one. Yep. So here we have the Small Business Compliance Group. Our mission, for the most part, our mission is to ensure that we evaluate for subcontracting program compliance, as well as we evaluate and provide recommendations on subcontracting plan, which we call a subcontracting plan review. Also, we provide CPAR and CPSR input based off of some of the compliance reviews that we do. And we also conduct the SBLO, Small Business Liaison Officer outreach and training. So before I pass it on to Jamie, I do want to reiterate that we do have an upcoming SBLO training scheduled for 21 September. If you've never been a part of one of those workshops, or if you have a pending compliance review coming up, you may want to make sure that you attend that training. I will drop that link in the chat here shortly. We do still have some open slots. We opened it up for about 500 people. We have about 150 slots left. So if you or anyone you know of that may be able to benefit from this training, I would advise you to go ahead and sign up for this training. We have a little bit over a month before the training is, and those slots will go fast, because we're going to put a blast out shortly for the training to get those slots filled. So SBLO training, again, 21 September, 1 to 3 Eastern time. So if you have an opportunity or you have an upcoming review, you definitely want to make sure that you're attending that training. Also, I would just want to reiterate that DCMA has availed ourselves in a way that we haven't in the past through advice and assistance, in which we will come in and do a cursory review for you on your subcontracting program to identify some pain points within your subcontracting program and give you an opportunity to ensure that you're able to get those things fixed, maybe before you actually have a full-on review. Again, this is something that hasn't been done in the past, which we are gaining more and more support for. However, we do need more people to take us up on that opportunity, in which we will give you the opportunity to let us know what you need to be trained on, or what you want training on. And whether we come on site or virtually, we will provide that training to you so that you can make informed decisions as it relates to your subcontracting program, and ensure that you are compliant with your DCMA 640 compliance review. Again, advice and assistance. If you need more information on that, my contact information will be at the end. You're more than welcome to reach out to me or anyone on my staff, and we will be able to provide you with a little bit more information as it regards to advice and assistance. And last but not least, if you're going to be at the Hub Zone Conference next week, and you would like to talk more about anything that's discussed here today, or just want to have a discussion, please don't hesitate to look me up. I will be there. I will be hanging around the SBLO workshop that is going to happen on that first day. So even though I can't get inside, I will be near. So again, if you want to have a conversation, I would love to speak with you on anything concerning subcontracting program compliance. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to the person that you want to hear from, my team lead, who's very knowledgeable when it comes to program compliance. So she's going to take you through a few things, and at the end, we'll try to take as many questions as we can. If not, the questions will be posted there, and we hope that those questions will get passed on to us, and we will get you an answer back. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my team lead, Miss Jamie. Come on.
Good afternoon, everyone. I can't see the questions, so if there are any, please interrupt me and I'll answer them. So what we're going to talk about today is small business compliance core functions. Like Dr. Hatcher said, everyone just receives a notice from an SBP and DCMA, and they have this review. And part of the problem on the industry side as well as the government side is what happens with these reviews and what else does DCMA small business do? So we want to provide this information so you can use this as a resource, because we actually do a lot to help our customers and industry, like Dr. Hatch already spoke to. Okay, so what do? We do subcontracting plan reviews, individual, commercial, and master. And specifically the DFARS calls out that we review master subcontracting plans because, as you know, the ACO is the contracting officer who actually approves those plans. We also review commercial subcontracting plans in support of PCOs. We also review individual subcontracting plans. And then the bread and butter of what we do and everyone thinks of us about is our small business subcontracting program compliance reviews. And these are all outlined in the FAR of where our authority comes to conduct these. And we usually call them the 640 review. In these reviews, we review compliance to FAR 52219-8, utilization of small business concerns, FAR 52219-9, small business subcontracting plan, FAR 19.7, the small business subcontracting program, and FAR 19706, responsibility of the ACOs. I think you realized I was asking some questions in the previous review. When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? What's going to change? And we have a lot of contractors that contact us all the time and go, well, do I need to do this now? One thing to remember is these compliance reviews are a review in arrears. So it's the last fiscal year. And you'll hear this if you've ever went through a 640 with me, is we can only review to the clauses that are in your contract. And that's why I asked when these clauses were going to start showing up in solicitations. And I love the response from 2 to 10 years. But okay. We also provide advice and assistance to include outreach for government and industry. Dr. Hatcher spoke about the advice and assistance we're doing on September 21st. We usually do that quarterly. I think this year it was 3 times. And then also, and every contractor that's went through advice and assistance with us, I think, or they told us that it was a positive experience. So that's another thing we do. So one, and I actually had to catch myself from saying this in the first slide because I need to reiterate it here, is we do not approve subcontracting plans. We received one yesterday from industry saying, please approve this commercial subcontracting plan. We do not approve subcontracting plans. We provide support to the contracting officer to determine if the individual subcontracting plan meets the requirements of FAR 52219-9D, and we help provide background into the goals and the requirements of DFARS. Commercial subcontracting plans are the exact same. We just provide advice to the PCO about if the commercial plan meets the requirements. We also provide information to the ACO if we approve master subcontracting plans, or if they should approve master subcontracting plans. When DCMA is the CACO, the ACO approves with recommendations from DCMA Small Business. But we put this in bold. DCMA Small Business does not approve master subcontracting plans. We only provide input to either the PCO or ACOs. This is one caveat, and I'm speaking today about the DCMA Small Business Compliance Group, not the Comprehensive Subcontracting Group, which is also under DCMA. That section, I mean, there are cousins. I mean, actually, I'd say there are siblings. They do approve and negotiate the actual plans for comprehensive subcontracting plans. But you know if you're in the CSP program and you know who your SPP is. So then there is some clarification about SSRs of what DCMA Small Business Group. If you go to DFARS 252-219-7003, it says that the summary subcontract report coordinator will accept the DoD SSR or reject it. And then you see, and you probably even see my name in there, is DoD owns this authority. Just due to resources, sometimes they delegate this authority to act on our behalf. So you'll see CSP, SBPs, or someone on our team, or even myself go in and accept and reject SSRs. But that is not our function, and that we have no authority to do so unless DoD delegates that at that time. And I want to clarify this because, like, I'll receive reviews of when I was on the special projects team to do it 5 years ago, and they're like, go in and accept my SSR. We don't really have the authority to do that. It's on behalf of DoD, and it's a special team every single year. Another clarification, and this, why we wanted to speak about it today, because I think that there's a lot of confusion. I actually think industry knows this requirement a lot better than the government does, is that the authority to acknowledge receipt or reject SSRs for commercial plans is with the contracting officer who approved the commercial plan. So the individual DoD SSR goes to the DoD level, OSBP. You submit it, you'll be assigned to someone, they'll go in and accept and reject after review. The commercial SSR needs to be submitted to the contracting officer that approved the commercial subcontracting plan, and they have the authority to accept or reject commercial SSRs. The comprehensive SSR is the authority with our sibling, Defense Contract Management Agency, and that's the CSP, Small Business Professional, will do that. DCMA Small Business Compliance Group, under the leadership of Dr. Hatcher, has absolutely no authority to accept or reject ISRs in the system. ISRs are specifically for the contracting officer who awarded the contract. We also get these requests all the time. We don't have that authority. And this is another thing that I think that industry knows, but the government doesn't, because we get more requests from government to go in there than industry. And we would if we could, but we have absolutely no authority to do so. So just clarification. Okay, so what do we do in the pre-award time in the acquisition process to help government and industry? We review subcontracting plans at the request of contracting officers. And a lot of contractors don't know they may be in a competitive environment, and they have FAR 52219-9 Alt 2, which specifically says you have to submit your subcontracting plan, part of your proposal. Those will come to DCMA Small Business, and we will provide input to the PCO for discussion items. All we do is we don't approve or disapprove, we just recommend compliance with the 15 elements and sub requirements. All requirements have to be included for us to recommend approval. These include 7 different assurances. All elements have to be addressed separately. And another thing we see, especially in this pre-award environment, we receive participation plans from the government where they'll say, hey, review the subcontracting plan to make sure it's compliant with FAR 52219-9. And it's a participation plan. A participation plan is different than a subcontracting plan, and that is out of our wheelhouse on to provide expertise of compliance with the participation plan. Also, I wanted to note on the first line of this slide, it says FAR 52219-9D. If you're a new SBLO and you have to write your first subcontracting plan, if this was Jamie Como was a large business, I would take that paragraph and copy it as a starting point. I say starting point, but paragraph D are the only requirements that are required in the plan. I mean, obviously you're going to have to tailor, but if you include everything in there, you will be compliant. Also, and this is, I mean, we just had an outbrief today on this, is only say what you're going to do when you write a subcontracting plan. becomes part of the contract. When I was asking about the crystal ball questions to see when they'd be part of the contract, we can only audit to what's on contract. Conversely, though, prime contractors put a ton of stuff in their subcontracting plan that they never even fantasize doing. And it happens probably every single review. So only put in there what you are required to put in there and what you're actually going to do. Yes, we're the government. We want more bang for our buck. If you're going to do $1 million over and above things, by all means, put them in there, but make sure you're actually going to do them. Some of your programs are very mature and very phenomenal. And you do industry days, and you do extra one-on-one counseling with small businesses. By all means, put that stuff in there. But if you're a contractor who isn't doing any of these things, don't put it in there. There are also other requirements in FAR 52219-9 that you have to fulfill, but it doesn't essentially have to be part of the subcontracting plan. I always want to tell everyone when you're writing your subcontracting plan, remember FAR 52219-9K. The failure to comply with this approved subcontracting plan shall be a material breach of contract. So if you're going to put a laundry list of items that you will do in your small business subcontracting plan, remember, if you don't do them, it's a material breach of the contract. It's like the government's buying 10 screws from you and you decide that you're only going to send them 5, you're in material breach of contract. Remember that when you're writing your subcontracting plan. I already spoke about writing plan to avoid confusion. And I have a slide coming up about common mistakes, but this is for government and industry, is if you're on the government side and you receive a plan and your contract's going to have a base and options, there shall be goals for the base in each option. And the goals shall align with the base in each option, even if it's an option quantity or an option time, like an option year. Make sure the goals align with that. We will recommend disapproval for a plan that has goals based on the CLIN. And I know we receive this from the government all the time. Why do you care? They went the next level and broke them down by the CLIN. When you get to the point of looking at the subcontracting achievements versus the ISR, and the goals are at the CLIN level versus the base in each option, it's a nightmare. And I mean, I would almost go to say when plans are set up like that, and you're all going to hate this, is 100% of the time, the goals aren't being reported correctly. And I mean, it's been a few years now, but in May of 2020, that was a major finding for 4 agencies, that the plans did not match the goals as reported on the ISR. And the government never caught it. They just kept accepting these ISRs. We also, and I spoke about this before, is that we provide input in accordance with the DFARS. In reviewing these subcontracting plans, we follow DFARS 219-705-4D, Roman numeral 1. We challenge any plan, or DoD has to, and we tell the contracting officer, you have to challenge any non-positive goals. So if you have any 0% goals, they need to be challenged. Also, as a reminder to government, if you have a small disadvantage goal of less than 5%, must be approved 1 level above the contracting officer. So just remember that if you're going to incorporate a plan with less than 5% as a small disadvantage business goal, has to be approved at 1 level above the contracting officer. Part of what we do in this whole process is we review compliance to FAR 52219-9D through FAR 52219-9D15. We are not approving, we don't disapprove, we just provides solely recommendations, but this is one of the areas that DCMA small business can help the government extremely, in the sense that if you have questions about plans, and we will administer the resulting contract, by all means, send them to us. I mean, our team right now is so robust, so astute. They can really help contracting officers out. Once again, we only pay recommendations. I know I sound like a broken record, but we only provide recommendations. We have the
Please do.
utmost respect for contracting officers, and contracting officers, if you disagree with us, you have that warrant because you have the right to disagree with us. Was there a question?
There is a question
Okay.
from an anonymous attendee.
Okay.
Is that 5% SDB threshold for upper level approval based on total contract value or subcontract value?
I wish you weren't anonymous, because this is an awesome question. And I actually wanted to speak about this. It is based on subcontract threshold. The contracting officer can determine goals based on contract value, but the requirements under D1 and D2 of FAR 52219-9 and that 5% is based on subcontract value. Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am, there is. Let me see if I can get back to that one. Let's see here. Oops, it disappeared. Okay, hang on. I'm going to jump over to another screen. Here we go. How often do you see primes with goals of 5% or more for SDBs? Okay, I'm going to jump in on that one, although this is your platform, and I will say I actually have seen them that way. But now I'll let you go ahead and take it.
You better repeat the question, because I think there's something that I'm missing there.
Okay, how often do you see primes with goals of 5% or more for small disadvantaged businesses?
Honestly, it's all over the map. And I mean, as you know, industry, some government agencies actually set your goals and tell you in the solicitation. So we see 5% all day long when they do that. And then you have some contractors who, I'm sure some of the SBLs on the line, that you consistently, which we love, beat that 5% small disadvantage goal. But then we have other contractors in different industries that a small disadvantage goal of 5% is not feasible. So it's all over the map. One thing, and I don't have the FAR reference, but it specifically states that we can't negotiate subcontracting goals upward if it'll cause the government a significant cost. We are going to try, but every contracting officer should know that. But yes, we see them all over the board, and some people, like, I think we just did a review that this contractor was consistently hitting 20% in SDB, which was awesome. Next question, if there is any.
We have a owner for the 5% question. Ms. Carolyn George.
Okay, yeah, I love that. That's a great question. And just always remember, they're based on subcontracting values, the percentage of subcontract. That's your 100% base, how much you're going to subcontract, that's where your percentages are. But you'll notice in your ISR, as well as if you read the FAR, the contracting officer can say, hey, you know what? I want to know them based on contract value too. You have to do both, but these are all based on subcontract value.
Thank
Is
you
that
so
all?
much. Okay,
Okay.
back to you.
Keep interrupting me. Makes the training better. Okay. So how does government request reviews of small business subcontracting plans? Send it to this inbox. When you send it, include the plan, the solicitation, contract number, cage code, and if it is an FMS requirement or not. as everyone else, we track FMS support. And if it's a foreign military sales contract, that does not mean it's automatically exempt from Part 52219-9. So let us know. And the turnaround's generally 7 business days. Sometimes this could be longer. And one thing I want to tell the government is, if you do not receive a reply, please follow up, because way before that 7 days, you're going to receive an automated response from our inbox telling you the SBP that was assigned. And we have to figure out something IT-wise, because if you send an encrypted email to this inbox or send one letters wrong, we're never going to receive it. And I'll tell you, under Dr. Hatcher, he's a fearless leader in the sense we support our customers. And then when he's not around, you got me, and we'll jump through hoops. So if you don't see something, I would say 2-3 days, not on a holiday, of who it's assigned to, check it. Because I know in the past, there was stuff that dropped through the box for months. But that is not occurring. We just had one today. They were sending encrypted. They've been sending since July. And that's not how we do business anymore at small business. So if you don't see an assignment right away, by all means ask. Just follow up and we will get on it. One thing else is I'm hounding this in is we don't review subcontracting plans on request of contractors. We're supporting the government in this. That being said, like Dr. Hatcher said, advice and assistance. If you have an SBP and you're like, you know what, I'm not sure about this new requirement that came out in paragraph D, or I just want to see if my plan's correct, contact us and we will do it on behalf of you. You will not receive an official memo, but will help. In accordance with advice and assistance. If you've worked with me in the past, I mark up plans all the time. The thing is we're not going to give you an official letter so you can, so Industrio says to the contracting officer, hey, DC May Small Business said this is approved. Like I said, they're contracting officers. They have that warrant. They have the authority. We can tell them all day long we recommend approval or disapproval, but they have the ultimate authority. And I mean, they have my utmost respect. So they get to decide, but we will provide advice and assistance and say what DCMA thinks is compliant with those 15 elements and sub-elements. Okay, so this
We have-
slide.
Jane, we have one more, hun,
Yes.
from Priscilla Jones. 19.705-4C says no goal should be negotiated upward if it is apparent that a higher goal will significantly increase the government's costs or seriously impede the attainment of acquisition objectives. On incentive subcontracting clause 52.219-10, incentive subcontracting plan may be used when additional and unique contract effort, such as providing technical assistance, could significantly increase subcontract awards to small business, small disadvantaged business, veteran-owned business, and service-disabled veteran-owned business and women-owned business concerns. It's in the chat if you want to read it to.
No, I'm just trying to think of, it's kind of like apples and oranges in the sense, under the incentive clause, by all means, that's part of your proposal. You'll receive an incentive fee if you use small businesses more so, right? And that needs to be part of your acquisition strategy to the government. Under where we can't negotiate goals, if we have a contractor who has a 3% goal to SDB, and that's the only thing they're subcontracting, and that is because it's a part inside an aircraft engine that everything has to be pre-qualified, and they're the only subcontractor that has been qualified to provide that part, that's the situation where the government could go in all day long and say, hey, we want your SDB goal up to 5%. How much would it cost the government, or it would cost the prime contractor who would translate those costs into the government to qualify another source? That's what the talking about is. The incentive contracting, I wish that we had more of a part of that, because we really don't have any part of it. And it's just my situational awareness, but it's a great clause. If you are under incentive contract and you can figure out a way to use more small businesses, you will, and provide documentation. Remember, it's the government, all documentation, you should receive an incentive fee for using more. So Priscilla, if you have more questions about that later, you can just email me. I'm just being transparent. It isn't my area of expertise, but I do know about it, and we don't deal with incentive fees, and we don't deal with incentive fee determinations on the small business subcontracting element either. Next question.
I don't see any other questions now. And Priscilla said, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I love this medium for this requirement, because like I have some contractors who seriously should be a DAU professor on the difference between IDIQs and BOAs, and the government every time tells them wrong. So anyone on the government side, actually, if you're on this call, you're probably already an expert. Just always remember, there's a huge difference in how plans are set up for IDIQs, D-type contracts versus BOA-type contracts. For an IDIQ, the threshold to have a plan is the maximum ceiling amount of the contract for the base and all options. So if you have a base and 4 one-year options, and each year, the base and the 4 options is $200,000, and you're not going to hit that threshold until option year 3, you still need a plan starting out. It's on the total ceiling amount. Subcontracting plans are also at the base level for IDIQs. They are not on the task order level. Do not put, and see, we have so many contractors, we go in to do a review, and the first question is why is there a plan on this F order when it's in support of a D-type contract? They're like, we know. See this dissertation we gave to the contracting officer setting up the contract, that the plan needs to be at the base level and not every single task order. That is correct. There has to be a plan at the base level and not on task order levels. Remember, an IDIQ is a contract, so there shouldn't be 75 subcontracting plans for every single task order under an IDIQ. The subcontracting plan covers the entire contract to include all delivery orders. You will have contracting officers negotiate goals at the task order level, but it is not in the form of a new plan. So, and you also know, was it in April 20, SBA could probably give you the exact date, is April 20 or 21 where they changed ISRs where you can report on the task order level now? That is when the contracting officer sets up goals at the task order, but it is not a new plan. This is the exact opposite of when you have a BOA, a G-type. Subcontracting plans are at the task order level, the F level under these. So you're only going to have a plan when that task order, solely that task order, exceeds $750,000. That's the only time you're going to need a subcontracting plan. Also, the ISRs for BOAs are submitted, or the 294s, because DoD is still under that deviation, is at the task order level. So that's for BOAs, where at an IDIQ level, the plan and the ISRs are at the D-type level.
got another question.
Okay.
Are there ever goals at the task level of max?
Yes, there are. And I think your Seaport E is set up like that. If you have Seaport contracts. And yes, they do that a lot. So you just, when you're going in, just read your contract really well and see if they're doing task or goals at the task order level.
Thank you.
Is that it?
That's it for this moment. I love these questions that are coming in. Thank you.
Me too. I'd rather just sit around and answer questions. So keep them coming. Okay. So the next thing, and was a change, and I think it was in 21. I can't remember, but we always see this problem. First of all, FAR 52219-9D9 says that utilization of small business concerns, FAR 52219-8, should be in all subcontracts that offer further subcontracting opportunities. So this assurance is also in your plan, but make sure when your legal team's putting together your standard terms and conditions and flow downs, that they flow down FAR 52219-8 at all dollar values, not just over the SAT. The government flows it down only over the simplified acquisition threshold, but we make large business prime contractors with subcontracting plans flow it down at all dollar values. And this includes if you have a subcontract, if there's further subcontracting opportunities, but I have a hard way of saying you didn't subcontract for a computer or buy a computer in support of a contract. So I would make the argument it's pretty much for everything. Is that it's even over the under the micro purchase threshold, -8 has to be flowed down. If you state in your plan, and this is for industry because industry does this a lot, is they'll say, hey, we're in accordance with FAR 52219-9D9, we're going to flow down utilization of small business concerns in accordance with FAR 19708A. It's a completely different requirement. Remember, the prescriptions in the FAR are the requirements for the government. And that's why I always say we can only review to what's on your contract. Read your contract. FAR 52219-9D9 says that you have to include FAR 52219-8, utilization of small business concerns, in all subcontracts that offer further subcontracting opportunities. Also, and this one, we get pushback from the government, probably more than even industry, because when we explain it, FAR 52219-D9 states you have to receive subcontracting plans from subcontractors if they're an other than small business concern. If the contract and the current threshold is $750,000. And if you remember, this subparagraph always had a number until 20 or 21. I can't remember. Now it says in excess of the applicable threshold. DCMA small business, when a contractor puts, let's say they put $750,000 and $1.5 million for construction, we will recommend disapproval because, and industry, please listen up right now. If you put that threshold, you know DCMA is going to come in 3 years for a 2022 contract and say, hey, your threshold, you said 700,000 and didn't, or 750, and you didn't put in accordance with the definition. So for the life of that contract, any subcontract, even if you issue a subcontract in 5 years down the road, you're stuck at that threshold at 700,000 or 750. I keep saying 700 because we're dealing with it right now with 700 through the life of that contract. Where if you put the exact verbiage, and that's why I said I'd copy and paste paragraph D, through the life of that contract. And let's be honest, you have a very mature subcontractor. And you say, hey, I need a subcontracting plan with you because I said in my contract that I'm going to get subcontracting plans for everything over 750. In 3 years, the threshold's 850. They're going to tell you essentially, sorry to be blunt, go pound sand, even though you are on the hook to get it. That's why always, always, always say in excess of the applicable threshold in 19702A.
Two questions.
Okay.
Go ahead. Finish your thought there.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. First question is FAR 52-219-8 required to be flowed down to subcontract with subcontractors located in a foreign country?
It's a good question. So, and I'm hesitant because I kind of like go back and forth. If you read the prescription, or not the prescription, but the clause, it says it shall be included in all subcontracts that offer further subcontracting opportunities. And then you go to FAR 52-219-9B, the definition of a subcontract. It says anything in support of a DoD prime or subcontract that calls for supplies or services. So just based on that loop of rationale, you would say, yes, I need to flow it down. But then if you look at FAR 52-219-9L, it says exclude all foreign from the subcontracting base. And if you look at the prescription of 19, pretty much all of 19.7, it's not required for foreign or outside the United States. So I guess I'm just talking myself and thinking out loud, which I'm trying not to do as much, is I would say yes. If you read the clause, it's not that much, but I think you can make the legal argument it's not. I think I'm going to throw that over the fence to SBA to answer, or submit in writing and I'll get the textbook answer. But
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, next question. I'll just read the whole question. Quote.
Okay.
Sorry for the follow-up, but if my MAC task order does not, all caps, have goals assigned attached to it, is that an issue? I assume they simply follow the goals for the MAC goals at the MAC level.
That is not an issue at all. And there's actually no requirement for them to have goals at the task order level. They should be at the IDIQ MAC, multiple award contract level. So there is no requirement. If you have them at the base, you're submitting your ISRs at the base. That's completely fine. I mean, there is no requirement for the task order. The FAR is even written as the contracting officer may require goals at the task order level. May. So they get to choose, but you do have to do it at the base level. Next question.
That's it for this minute. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Here, what am I doing? Okay, I'm not too far. Okay, one other thing, and everyone's in JVs now, right? Great way. Just remember, JVs are treated the same as a large prime. DCMA Small Business Compliance Group will come out and do a review of the JV. There's one subcontracting plan from the JV. There's not a subcontracting plan from partner number 1 and partner number 2, and they report as a subcontractor in support of JV. I know in the past, and I'm talking like in the 90s, they said this is how you're supposed to do it, but that is not correct. The joint venture is the company, and they have to have one subcontracting plan. Remember, the contract's awarded to the JV, not the contractors that form the JV. So don't have a subcontracting plan from partner number 1, partner number 2, and say, oh, this is our JV. No, it's one plan. Your two companies decided to make a joint venture, which is obviously helping your companies as well as the government. We're not saying don't do joint ventures, but there's one subcontracting plan. And once again, if you go to FAR 52-219-9I, there's only one subcontracting plan. So we're not getting two plans from two different large primes. Okay, other common errors. I'm talking too much, trying to get through this and stay on schedule. Remember,
you're doing great. Don't worry about it. You've got a lot of information that is, again, very, very valuable. So please, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Well,
you're doing great.
Okay. So subcontracting goals, remember that if you have a woman-owned small business, if they meet the definition of a woman-owned small business, they also meet the definition of a small business. So they have to be counted in each category in accordance with I have a typo there, 9D1 and 9D2. So for the dollar goals and the percentage goals, check your math every time. And then here's another telltale sign. Remember, if you have a service disabled veteran-owned small business, they also meet the definition as a veteran-owned small business, and they also meet the definition of a small business. I think I just said that. But also think about this way when you're thinking is, if you notice the DoD goals, there's no veteran-owned small business goal, but the service disabled veteran-owned small business goal is 3%. That also means the veteran-owned small business goal is. So remember, back to someone's question, is subcontracting goals are based on the total to be subcontracted. So you base it on those, make sure every area that you count a small business, they meet that requirement. And this is, I had a long way of explaining FAR 52219-8A. If they meet the definition of a small disadvantaged business, they also meet the definition of a small business. And you don't just add up all the subcategories and that's your small business goal. If they meet one of those, they also meet the definition of a small business. Make sure the subcontracting plan is compliant with the current version of FAR 52219-9D. It changes, make sure it's up to date. I already spoke to this, is socioeconomic dollars and percentage should not add up to the total small business dollars. FAR 52219-9C, there shall be goals separate for the base in each option. And another thing that we've seen conversely, and I didn't speak about this earlier, is you'll have a 5-year base, but the contractor will break it down by each year, and then they report each year. That's not okay. Look at your current structure. What's a base? What's an option? There needs to be a base for each base and each option. And when I say each base, the whole base should have one goal. One thing else that's come up is, let's say you have a parts contract and you have a base quantity of 100 screws, and then you have different option quantities for different types of screws. There needs to be a goal for each one of those different option quantities. And then you report when those options are awarded. But there has to be a base for each option, for the base in each. There has to be a goal for the base in each option. Remember, subcontracting achievements by affiliates shall be included in your subcontracting goals. So if you have an affiliate who's helping support your prime DoD contract, and they subcontract for some computer and paper, that is in the affiliate's goals who owns that prime contract. Same goes at the sub level. Next thing, I'm on camera. So subcontracting affiliates shall be included in the subcontracting goals. And I want to reiterate this in the sense is that do not count a subcontract to an affiliate. Your affiliate, think of it as one company, and you guys have all probably seen my slides. They're not pretty, that's showing this whole way of reporting, but an affiliate is not a subcontract, but anything your affiliate subcontract for is considered your own subcontracting. So it needs to be in your goals and reported on your ISRs. Also, provide rationale up front why your goals are low. They don't meet the DoD goals. And there could be a completely justifiable reason. Like I was talking about that aircraft engine part, is you only include your justification when you're like, you know what, there is no way I'm doing my best to use every type of small business concern, but there is no way without increasing the cost of my $500,000 contract, $100,000 if I don't use this. Explain that in your plan. And another thing is we'll push back if they're non-positive goals, and the contractor will then put in an email this great justification. Remember, the plan is part of the contract, and they're not going to attach an email into your contract. That justification actually needs to be in the plan. And then once again, subcontracting goal less than 5% must be approved at one level above the contracting officer. Okay, so we've talked about all pre-award of what DCMA small business does. Then I'm going to go to what we do in the post-award environment, which everyone knows us for, is 640 reviews, or small business subcontracting program compliance reviews. Okay. First of all, we fulfill the responsibilities of the ACO in accordance with FAR 19706. And most of you probably have never heard me even like come back to these requirements or any SBP you work with. The 640 has been designed to provide all this information to the ACO and PCOs. We are fulfilling these requirements under 19706 through our small business subcontracting program compliance reviews. Okay, how does DCMA small business ensure that the contractor is meeting the requirements of FAR 52219-8, FAR 52219-9, and the small business subcontracting plan? We do this once again through the 640, which you all know about us, is in accordance with FAR 42302A55. We're providing periodic surveillance, and that's our 640 review. We're also, through this periodic surveillance, fulfilling our requirements on behalf of the ACO in accordance with 19706. Okay, so what are we doing in a 640? Is we've talked about this. We're determining if you're meeting the requirements of FAR 52219-8, representations and certifications. That the NAICS assignment is to the subcontract, and reps and certs are current, accurate, and complete as of the day of the offer for that NAICS code and corresponding size standard that is assigned to the subcontract. We ensure timely and accurate submissions of ISRs and SSRs. Most people report their ISR achievements correctly. We are finding, and this is on government side as well, is if you dig into the SSR, make sure that you're reporting in accordance with FAR 52219-9L2. It's not just adding up their ISRs. It's not just including stuff where you're a prime contractor, but make sure that you're meeting all the requirements of L2, which is SSR submission. We also check FAR 52219-D9, how you flow down the requirements to your subcontractors. First of all, we talked about, do you include -8 in all subcontracts that offer further subcontracting opportunities? And this is to small businesses as well as large. Do you receive subcontracting plans from other than small business concerns in accordance with FAR 52219-9D9? Also, if you read 9D9, it says you have to obtain a subcontracting plan and it has to comply with FAR 52219-9. So obtain subcontracting plans all day long, but make sure they comply with the version of FAR 52219-9 that's in your contract. Also, we check for the documentation that the prime contractor is telling its subcontractors with subcontracting plans, hey, this is the prime contract number, this is the UEI, our UEI, and here's the email address. This is so imperative to give the right email address, and we've kind of toyed back and forth is making it a standard recommendation. A lot of companies or contractors are setting up a generic email inbox like sblo@abccorp.com, because if the person who's actually going in and accepting and rejecting subcontractors ISRs does not receive that email, or it's not submitted in response to that email that's actually going to go in and accept or reject, they'll never be seen. The prime contractor will never be able to see them. So it's imperative that there's quality control through your system, that when one buyer, if you're having your buyers go in and accept and reject ISRs, or the SBLO, let's say this great SBLO wins the lottery and says, see you the next day. If they're submitting to their personal email, all their subcontractors that's listed in ESRS, they win the lottery, you'll never be able to even see those in the system. Where we can just look at everything. I think it's a glitch in the system. I hope when they do the rewrite, they figure out a way around this little glitch, but that's where we're at. So it's imperative that you provide this information to your subcontractors. Also, D10 Roman numeral 7, you have to require that your subcontractors do the same thing that you do as a prime contractor. We make sure that the prime contractor ensures subcontractors submit ISRs, and then they go in and accept or reject subcontractors' ISRs. Also, we all know that you've had that situation where you're a prime contractor and you know the subcontractor needs to submit their ISRs. They have a plan. You've sent them all the information in accordance with D10 Roman numeral 6, and they won't submit an ISR. Maintain that documentation. We live in the real world. We know that sometimes not everyone does the stuff they're supposed to. As a prime contractor, we do in a review, and you have a very strong program in which we can see you always have your subcontractors submit ISRs, you always accept and reject, and you have some rogue subcontractors that they provide a key requirement that you can't get around, then just maintain that documentation that you tried to get in. Okay, so we also do -E requirements. This is counseling, discuss upcoming opportunities, notification of penalties, assignment of NAICS codes, all the requirements in paragraph E of FAR 52219-9 we check. One thing I want to say with this is, yes, you have to fulfill all the requirements in paragraph E, but that's not requirements that have to be in your plan. Just little tidbit. You have to perform in accordance with the subcontracting plan. Like I said, we make sure you say you're going to do what you said you're going to do, you do what you said you're going to do. We check that. Okay, now let's talk about the big new thing everyone's focused on. I don't know if you know that DoD is or it's in the Federal Register asking for responses by September 12th on payments to small business subcontractors. I suggest everyone who has any opinion on it whatsoever, definitely go in. We do check this so hard right now. And honestly, I completely support it, because we can have these great reports and we can do all this outreach, but if you're not paying a small business on time, they're probably going to go out of business. Yes.
Okay, it's from Anonymous. For commercial plans, how is the requirements for NICS assignment to the subcontract, not the subcontractor, being adhered to by large contractors? It's not really feasible to include a NICS and size standard to every PO issued at the time of award.
If we have a contractor, and there's a contractor who has a phenomenal program, it's over $1 billion program, and they're under a commercial plan, and if you're under a commercial plan, -8 is required for everything, and so is -9. So you have to tell them the NAICS code and corresponding size standard before subcontract award, obtain reps and certs current, accurate, complete as of the day of the offer, and then assign a NAICS code and corresponding size standard. So if your company decides to be under a commercial plan, it does happen. What I found that the most successful programs, because I know you're like, there's no way, this is so many resources, is what they've done is everything they're purchasing, every part, every service, they go into the system, and the upfront resources are hard, but not the output after, because it's all automated. They assign the NAICS code and corresponding size standard to every single thing they buy. And then they report on the line item level. So let's say they bought 5 different items, 5 different NAICS code and corresponding size standards. You have to assign the NAICS code and corresponding size standard that's the principal purpose of the subcontract. Well, SBA went through their legal, and they determined that if you report on the line item level, you can state that's the subcontract level. So it's just hard coded into the system, and then everything's automated. But I know you don't like that response, but it is a requirement. You have to do it if you choose to be under commercial plan.
And we have another question.
Okay.
How does the small business specialist contracting officer ensure small businesses compliance on their goals submitted on the small business participation commitment document? Okay. Sometimes small businesses submit their SBPCD with the prime goals and the subcontractors' goals. We have a process in place, ESRS, where we check the large businesses for small business goal compliance. However, what is the method to ensure the small businesses are in compliance with what they proposed on their small business goals? Submitted by anonymous.
Okay, well, first of all, anonymous, that's awesome that you care and you're trying to track that. But bad news, I have no idea how you would track that. We're actually tracking it in 640s. We go farther than just ISRs. That requirement for records on a subcontract by subcontract basis, we go through and make sure that everything in their participation plan, they have an actual subcontract to that subcontracting firm. So we're doing it at the large level when I say the other than small, but I have no idea how you do that. And we don't work with small businesses. So I wish you the best of luck and keep up the great work, because that's awesome. You care.
And I
Next
see
one.
Dave Walls has got his hand up. Dave, can you unmute?
Yeah, that's a great question that was brought up. So in Seaport, it's easy because there's a requirement in Seaport that small businesses have to report their subcontracting goals and their dollars that they're spending on subcontracting. Outside of Seaport, it is a little bit more difficult. They would have to do it through like just checking invoicing, and so that's the way the small businesses are checked on their commitment documents. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, but we got a thanks. You're welcome, Ernice.
Okay, we also checked that there's been a good faith method effort made in accordance with FAR 19705-7B. The FAR was revised in September of 21 that brought the good faith analysis into the FAR, not just in the CFR. And if you're not going to meet your goals, definitely go there. It's really a good way to be able to document that you did make a good faith effort. Okay, so how can you leverage our subcontracting plan reviews? This is for the government. For solicitations that are not certified for small businesses, you can use this as an evaluation factor. You can email that inbox and we can provide the previous 640. As per past performance has to be a proposal evaluation factor, and this includes utilizations of small business. We can provide these 640 reviews to you. the government, of course. And so you can use them there. They don't just do a report, get put into a hole, and no one ever sees them. I mean, we have information on every contractor we do a review on. Okay. We also provide, and contractors need to know this too, and this is why we do every single DCMA contract that's under review. Plus, we don't want anything slipping through the cracks, is if you have a CPARS assessment, you can email the inbox, and DCMA Small Business may, and I say may because obviously there's contracts out there that we haven't reviewed, can provide information for your past performance or their performance in that specific review period. So by all means, we do help with CPARS quite a bit. And I don't think the government knows that. I mean, we have like repeat customers. They're like, oh, great, we came to DCMA Small Business. They give us all this information. And so then they keep coming. But I don't think all PCOs and small business professionals know that we do have that capability. We also, in these 640s, review the entire program. So we kind of know, like I say, I call mature or growing or a program in its infancy. We can provide insight like that too. Our ratings for the 640 mirror the CPAR ratings. So I'm not essentially saying that the CPAR rating is exactly what the 640 rating is, but they're pretty close and there's a good crosswalk between the two. Okay. Post-award responsibilities of the contracting officer. We can help with this stuff. We don't perform this function and you have to, but if you're a contracting officer and you have to do this assessment or analysis, come to DCMA Small Business. We can help with that. Okay, here's our ratings. You've all seen them. If not, these are the CPAR ratings. It's FAR 42, Table 2, and 42-1503. And then best practices for industry. Review your policies and procedures. Outreach generally translates into higher subcontracting achievements. Dr. Hatcher talked about the Hub Zone conference next week. Document, document, document. Verify your accuracy of data provided. The SSR, and I kind of went into this, is we have reports created in an ERP system that was created years and years ago. And your 3 SBLOs knew. Make sure that those reports, you know the inputs to them. So verify the accuracy instead of pushing a button and putting the same thing in the report that is different, and it is in accordance with FAR 52-219-9L2. Okay, train regularly, maintain records of that, establish a compliance culture, attend the DCMA SBLO training. Dr. Hatch already put in a plug for it. It's September 21st. Also, I'll put in a further plug if you want more training on a certain topic. By all means, email him those topics. Understand the purpose of the review. The most mature and successful programs have leaderships as well as the SBLOs. Every SBLO out there is passionate and awesome. And I literally say that everyone. It's the success comes when there's leadership involvement. Maintain documentation, communicate with us, your small business professional, if you have one assigned. Otherwise, research Dr. Hatch and we'll get someone to help. And when in doubt, ask a question. I obviously answer a ton of questions a day. By all means, ask questions. Best practices for government. Use us in evaluating past performance. We have a wealth of information. We know these programs. A contracting officer, utmost respect, has so much to do, has such a wide breadth of knowledge they have to know. We are very specialized. Use us, we can help. Make sure you incorporate the subcontracting plan in the contract. If you read FAR 52-219-9, it states at request of the contracting officer. That's why I always go to Alt-2. That's when it has to be in the solicitation. Make sure you incorporate the contracting officer. Also, make sure that subcontracting plan is checked required in FPDSNG. So essentially when you're filling out your car, if you have an IDIQ contract, obviously you don't obligate any money at the base level, it will automatically populate incorrectly. Your contractors cannot report ISRs if it's checked commercial plan and they're under an individual plan, comprehensive plan, and they're not under the comprehensive program, or under if you say a plan's not required, and it will automatically populate incorrect on a D-type contract because it's based on obligated amount. So check that before you sign your contracts. And we like when you upload the plan to EDA, it's awesome. And then if contract administration is delegated for the plan to the cognizant ACO office, that's for government. So I'm
You have
finally
another
done.
question, hon.
Okay.
It's anonymous, great information training, very informative training. Sorry about that. Curious, how many CLPs are being recommended for today's training?
That's outside of my area. That's the regional council can tell you that.
Yeah, that's more an internal question for the regional council. And my expectation will be like 3.5. Over.
Sorry, I increased it probably a half an hour by talking too much.
No,
But come listen
not
if
at
you
all.
like listening on the 21st. We'll talk about this stuff. Not this, but anything applicable.
You're doing great. We probably should wrap up before too long though, so that we can have Ms. Melinda and Ms. Jackie talk a little bit about our handouts, our handbook.
Yeah, I want to listen to that too. So any other questions? No.
Great
Dr.
job.
Hatcher,
Thank you.
sorry, I cut you off.
I was just saying with emphasis, great job, Jamie. Thank you. Such a great presentation. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Y'all have a great day. Dr. Hatcher, do you have any closing remarks?
Oh, no closing remarks. Thank you all for allowing us to share this time with you and provide this information. And again, SBLO training, 21 September, 1 to 3 Eastern time.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Carolyn George had a raised hand.
I'm not seeing a way to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I just accidentally hit that. I'm sorry, ladies. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Jamie, Dr. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a wealth of information and knowledge. It's tremendously helpful to have this information and shared in this format and with this group. Let's see, I'd like to turn the meeting over now to Ms. Jackie Hacker and Ms. Melinda to discuss or share information about this council's Small Business Professionals Handbook. This is something that we put together a few years ago. We had a wonderful sample that we kind of built on and then gave it our own spin. This is not a handbook on policy. This is a handbook on technical information. So Ms. Melinda, Ms. Jackie, take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you. Well, this is exciting because after Jamie's presentation, you're definitely going to want to utilize this guide that we have. Next slide, please. So as Kay said, we put it together as a guide for all small business professionals, both on the government and the industry side. And it's a reference. We have it as a link that we'll be sending out again for everyone to be able to have access to that. And I'm going to be talking really quickly because we want to make sure that we have time for Dr. Nagel.
And really
next-
quick, Jackie, we need to
Yes.
make sure they understand that it's has to be available only by private link.
Yes. And so the members of the council, the Pacific Northwest Regional Council, receive that from me out of our distribution. Next slide. So we're showing you the table of contents. And again, it's a guide from the beginning of the SBLO's role and SBA's in, as Jamie had talked about with the subcontracting plans. We're providing you with templates. We have information in there on DCMA and the 640 review, the NICS codes, just a host of things. We are in the process right now of getting ready to update this handbook. It is outdated. And I want to send out a call out to any of the seasoned small business professionals that would be willing to take just a portion and help us in updating this handbook. We want to have it done by December of this year. We plan on splitting into different sections, send it out. We'll pull that all together. Melinda and I'll put it all in and get the handbook totally updated, and then we'll send out the link again that has been updated. So please email me if you are interested in helping us with these updates, and that's jackie.hacker@hdrinc.com. If you look at the chapters, it really follows a lot what Jamie's just talked about earlier today. And importantly, is that it just gives you a guide. If you have any questions as you go through this guide, I have sent out our mentors that we have with the council, where you can contact any of us at any time by email or phone if you have questions that help along to help you maybe to better understand something, or you have a burning question. And realizing, especially if you're new at this, is that you're not going to know what to ask until you get into the situation. And that's how we've all learned. It's kind of on the job training. So Melinda, we've got just a few minutes. Do you have any input on this as well?
We also would like, if you're interested in helping us update it, you can email either Jackie or myself, and we would be happy to. We're going to divide it up into sections and then put it all together. And Jackie and I will look at all the changes that are being made and make sure that we get them all into the revised guide when we finish it.
If you need it, and I believe you can download it also off of the link so that you could have a copy. I know I am a old school paper. I like to put sticky notes and highlight and do those things so I have at ease and being able to look something up. You could go to the next slide so that they could see more of, yeah, there we go. So in this one, you'll see too, is that that's where we have a lot of the templates to help you. You see sample flow down letters, review sheets, all about everything you can imagine, acronym definitions, and our email addresses are on the bottom. We are really excited about this guide. We did have a great template to start with, and SBA used to have one years ago when I first started out, and I'm not going to say how many years ago that was, but it was very helpful when I was first coming out of that into the SBLO positions. As Jamie has talked about, you know, you look at the SBLOs, they'll look at your org chart to see where you lie in the company. Do you have the authorization to make decisions in order to ensure that we have small business opportunities on our proposal efforts or pursuits? And so there's a lot of things that as a new SBLO that you're not thinking of, and having time to be able to get some of these put together and getting prepared should you end up having a subcontract program audit, because I think they're very complex when they come in and do that subcontracting reviews. I've been through several of them, and it usually takes me a couple of months in order to prepare, just so that I have everything that they could possibly ask for. And I go by that 640 form of everything that's in there listed, being able to show that. And also, as the SBLO, you probably want to be with your procurement people and being able to answer those questions that DCMA or SBA would ask. It's important, and also learning from them. As you go through this guidance, it's going to help you to grow. It will help you to grow your program and see where some of, maybe there's some weaknesses in there. And again, we're all here to you in any way we can and provide some questions to help you through the process. So we're use this, and I will send out that mentor point of contacts again as well when we send out the link to this handbook, and we are hoping to have it done by December. So anybody that wants to offer to help us, please email us. We would definitely look forward to some help and to make sure that we get everything we need from this handbook.
And I also would like to add, if there's something else that you would like addressed in our manual, we're always open to add new items to this, okay? Because we want to make sure we're addressing everything that could be addressed in this manual. So that way, or I should say guide. So that way we make sure it's addressing every area that you would like to have in this guide for everybody else.
This is fun, and this will help you be, we want everyone to be successful. And when you're new, there's so much information to get through. So really appreciate the council has been able to allow us to be able to put this together and distribute it. We appreciate that. Thank you, Kay.
Same
Thank
here.
you, everyone.
You.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you so much.
We have one more question, and I guess whoever knows the answer can answer this in our panel as far as who's on our list here. How should contractors address requests from PCOs to remove proprietary markings on the ISP? Is there someone who can answer that?
Government?
I think that's one that, yeah, we'll take over to the board.
So we'll have to send that and maybe address it when we send out a questionnaire.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thank you again so much. And thank you, Melinda and Jackie, for working so hard at maintaining this guidebook, this desk guide. There's not anything else out there like this that I am aware of. And it is tremendously helpful, both for industry and government. This is something that for newly minted small business professionals in the government side, similar to industry, a lot of times we come in and we have a lot to learn. And this is a wonderful tool to add to our toolbox. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, I am really excited. I see that Mr. Nagel is already online and ready. We are so honored to have Mr. Nagel join us today. He is a very sought after speaker, presenter, author, attorney, all the above. His depth of knowledge is amazing. He's always got good information to share. And I just feel so fortunate that he's joining us today to share some of his time and his expertise. Mr. Nagel, did you want to operate your slides or would you like Ms. Melinda to operate them today?
If someone else could do that, despite your glowing introduction, I am a klutz when it comes to operating a computer. So
I totally understand because, yes, I was thrilled that Ms. Melinda was willing to take it on for me.
thank you. Thank you. By the way, if I may interrupt, Kate, I did not jump in to answer that last question about if the counting officer requests that proprietary data be alleged and be removed, because that's not a question that you can answer in 5 minutes or 55 minutes. It will depend entirely on funding, what type of contract, what technical data rights clause is in the contract. So, it's a very complicated issue, and it is an issue that if anyone will go to the mat on, be it contractor or government, it's an intellectual property issue. So it deserves more than a 2 or 3 minute response.
Thank you, sir.
I
Thank
want to
you.
make sure that everybody sees the slideshow.
I do.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. When Kay asked me to talk, I picked this topic, the greening of federal contracting and sustainability. And the reason I asked for it was because there's a Mack truck coming. And a lot of contractors, small business, large business, construction, supply services, they're not aware of it. But it's a big deal. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide. Let's get rid of that guy. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to talk about what the rules are already today and how they're changing. FAR Part 23 is basically devoted to the environment, energy, water efficiency, what have you. Not that many years ago, this was only about 4 pages. Now it's 20, and it's going to grow. It's definitely going to grow under a Biden administration. President Biden has made no secret of the fact that environment, clean energy, response to the climate crisis are watchwords of his administration. So that's the Mack truck that's coming. But I wanted to point out to you, what's the rule today that you may not be aware of? So I listed the salient subparts of FAR Part 23. The first one is sustainable acquisition policy. And the FAR defines sustainable as really having 2 goals: allowing humans and nature to survive harmoniously. And secondly, when the government buys something, that they think not only of the present generation, but of future generations. How is this going to affect our grandchildren or so? So subpart 23.1, very big deal, going to get bigger. 23.2, energy and water efficiency, hazardous material information and material safety data. That's going to be changed to add radioactive data. Recovered materials and bio-based, very, very important. Some of you may remember, not that many years ago, that when you signed on to a government contract, there was a clause in there, new materials. And you had to basically certify that everything on this contract is new. None of this recycled junk on a federal contract. But now everything's turned around. Now, to the maximum extent practicable, you will be using recycled or recovered material. Contracting for environmentally preferable products and services. I'm not sure how many are aware that the present requirement is that 95% of contract actions require that the products being delivered are energy efficient, water efficient, bio-based, environmentally preferable, non-ozone depleting, or made with recovered materials. So that's in there now, and it's been there for a few years. And then the last one today is ozone depleting substances and greenhouse gases. Remember that phrase, greenhouse gases. I'm going to come to that again in a little bit. Next slide, please, Melinda. Now, this is going to be very basic for you. Insulting what I just mentioned was the FAR. But remember, the agencies are allowed to supplement the FAR. I saw Ms. Como cited the DFARs a lot. But if you are dealing, for example, with the Air Force, you have to look not only at the FAR, you have to look at the DFARs, and you look at the Department of Air Force supplements. And if you deal with the GSA or the EPA, you've got to look at their agency supplements. Very basic. I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. What exists now is two provisions. In order to get a government contract, very often you have to file these two certificates. I swear to God, I'm going to use bio-based products here. I swear to God, I'm going to get recovered materials as to the maximum extent possible. And these are a bunch of the clauses. There are 15 clauses in FAR Part 23. These are the 7 that are most pertinent. You're going to promise that you're going to do energy efficiency, for example. Next slide, please, Melinda. Now, why did I waste all of your time by just talking about these provisions and clauses? I did it because that's part of the Mack truck. The Justice Department is getting very active, very aggressive on this matter. You've got to remember, the United States government is not the brightest entity on the face of the earth. But if at any point it thinks someone is trying to cheat it, things get very ugly very quickly. The government has 4 remedies it can take against someone who it thinks is trying to cheat it. Criminal, try to put them in jail. Civil, sue them, very often for double or triple damages. Administrative, debar them. Or contractual, terminate for default. Remember those provisions I mentioned that someone will swear to. I'm a small business. I'm going to comply with the Buy American Act. I'm going to comply with the cybersecurity. I'm going to comply with all these environmental rules. Those are statements. If you intentionally violate those, you're lying through your teeth. That is prosecutable under the False Statements Act. But I want to point out one other thing. The Justice Department is very aggressive on that. Melinda, you lied through your teeth when you said you were going to comply with the environmental rules. Then you should never have gotten that contract, Melinda. Therefore, every voucher, every invoice, every request for progress payment you submit against that contract that you were never entitled to, that's a separate false claim. And don't tell me, Melinda, how good a job you're doing. You would not have gotten that contract. So be aware of that. Violation of the clauses, those 15 clauses I mentioned on the previous slide, that can be grounds for terminating for default or debarment and or criminal sanctions. So all of this I'm going to talk about, pretty big deal. Okay. Next slide, please, Melinda. What is changing and what's coming? First, Congress has passed 2 statutes that throw mind-boggling large amounts of money at these problems. The American Rescue Plan, you may remember that, March of 2021, appropriated $1.9 billion. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, another 1.2, excuse me, not billion, trillion. So combined, they appropriated $3.1 trillion. And they use the word infrastructure, but this is not your grandparents' infrastructure. Your grandparents, when they would think of infrastructure, would think of roads, bridges, dams. This is much broader, and all of it with environmental concerns attached. Broadband, electric vehicle charging stations, airport gates, power grids, all of that is in there. So that is what is causing a lot of the interest in this area. Next slide, please, Melinda. What President Biden has done is issued 4 executive orders on that. Executive Order 13990, on the very day he was inaugurated, January 20th, 2021, he came out with this to tackle the climate crisis. The next week, 18 executive orders later, he came out with tackling the climate crisis. That's a big theme that's going on now. 1430, minimizing the reach of climate change on federal acquisition. That has set forth some pretty rigorous goals. And then 14057, catalyzing clean energy. Let me read some of those goals to you. Have all electricity from non-carbon sources by 2030, just 7 years from now. have net zero emissions from the federal government building portfolio by 2045. Now that means that the 300,000 federal buildings ought to be not emitting carbon in what 15 no about 18 years from now. Same thing with 600,000 government vehicles. A lot of the new contracts that are going to be awarded are energy savings performance contracts, where you would award a contract to K and K would go in and review what is going on in that federal office building in Seattle or something like that, and figure out ways to save energy or substitute cleaner energy. And that contractor would get a portion of that. So there are very aggressive goals being instituted now. And there is a whole new infrastructure of people that we never dealt with before. The Chief Federal Sustainability Office, the Commission on Environmental Quality, the White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy. All of this is coming. Next slide, please, Melinda. Okay. Now, remember I mentioned that President Executive Order 14030. That's one of the major changes that are coming. They came out with a proposed rule in November of 2022. They gave a 60-day comment period. That was extended to 90 days to February. There were over 38,000 comments received. When you get 38,000 comments, that gives you an indication of how important this is. What they're going to do, they're going to come out with a new subpart specifically devoted to greenhouse gases. They're going to come out with new provisions. They're going to come out with new clauses, and they're going to come out with a responsibility standard. I'm going to come up to that in a moment. Now, it's going to have varying applicability. It will apply to small businesses. There is a bit of an exemption for small businesses, but don't be fooled by that. The full brunt of this will be felt by small businesses, okay? Now, next slide, please, Melinda. Now, they're going to add 3 new provisions. Remember those things I mentioned a moment ago? Hey, I swear to God, I'm going to do this. Well, if you don't, there's 3 new requirements for you to certify to. And if you don't, the consequences can be dire. They're going to come out with several new clauses, expanding and intensifying the battle against climate change. Next slide, please, Melinda. I apologize if I'm going too fast, stop me. But I realize I think I'm the last speaker of the day, so I'm trying to move quickly before all of you leave me, and my ego won't tolerate it.
You're doing great. You're doing great. And yes, your information is valuable and appreciated.
So good. Thank you.
Keep up the great work. And you haven't lost anybody. I think we just added somebody else.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
You're bringing them in.
Good. Now, this has really been coming. This was forecast during the Obama administration. So I started saying then, you know, we're going to get an evaluation factor. You're all used to evaluation factors. Well, how good are you technically? How's your management? How's your past performance? How well have you done on subcontracting plans? And we are going to get that. But the new proposed reg, and let me emphasize to back up a little bit. It's proposed, but the comment period is closed. We could get the new rule tomorrow or next month or so. So this could come anytime. That does not mean that you will have to go into effect, get doing it right away, because I'll talk about that in a moment. But they did me one further. I was expecting just an evaluation factor, and that's coming, but they made it a responsibility factor. Take a look at that first paragraph there. For Part 9, which deals with contractor qualifications, including responsibility determination, will be amended to make it clear that if a prospective contractor has not complied with the disclosure requirements that I'll talk more in detail about in a moment, quote, the contracting officer shall, mandatory, presume that a prospective contractor is not responsible and therefore ineligible for award. So I've seen lots of contractors basically say, oh, Yeah, I'll put in a low price. They'll love it. Or wait till they see the glowing past performance reports I've gotten. They won't even get to that. Okay. If you have not complied with these new rules and made the disclosures that are required, you are ineligible. It is as if you were on the debarred list for that particular contract. Now, there are exceptions, and I quote them in that second paragraph. Take a look at that. Limited exceptions will apply if, for example, the non-compliance resulted from circumstances properly beyond the contractor's control, semicolon. The prospective contractor has shown it has taken substantial efforts to comply, semicolon, and the prospective contractor has made a public commitment to comply as soon as possible. I emphasize that word "and" because you've got to comply with all three of those requirements before you can get one of those limited exceptions. Now, there are situations in the reg where they will allow waivers, but it's got to be national security, emergency, things like that. So don't expect to get waivers anytime soon. That's a big deal. Even if it doesn't affect you, you're not bidding as the prime. If your prime is ineligible, thrown out, you won't get any subcontracts. Okay. Next slide, please, Melinda. Now, a question. Someone, but boy, that says pre-award bid protest. I don't know why that's there. That has nothing to do with pre-award bid protest. So that's a mistake. But let me just point this out to you. A question always comes up, well, where will this apply? This applies within the United States. Now, many of you would probably be thinking, well, that's probably the 48, the lower 48. Oh, well, maybe it means the 50 states and the District of Columbia. No. The president is giving this the broadest possible application. Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, Midway Atoll, okay, the Northern Mariana Islands. It applies all around the globe. It's in there, okay? Next slide, please. When is it effective, okay? Here you got a little breathing room. Whenever they come out with the final rule, whenever it comes out in the Federal Register, there are two categories of contractors who are mainly affected by this new rule. There's others coming out. Significant contractors, they'll be required to complete their greenhouse gases inventory disclosures within 1 year after publication of the final rule. Major contractors, those who receive more than $50 million in government obligations, you'll have 2 years to comply. Now, I don't know how often you follow the FAR in terms of its effective dates, but when the government gives you 1 year or 2 years to comply with a new rule, that's because they recognize this is a big deal and it's going to be very expensive to comply with, and it's going to be very difficult to comply with. One of the things the FAR Council had to do to decide to assure themselves that this is justified is that it outweighs the cost. The benefits outweigh the cost of contractors having to comply with this. And what the FAR Council did, and which many people commented on, is, well, these contractors will undoubtedly have to hire outside consultants, and the average cost of those outside consultants will be $104 an hour. And a lot of the comments of those 38,000 people who sent in comments basically was, it must be great still living in the 1970s. Let me put on my disco shoes and my leisure suit and I'll join you. Because if you think the average cost of an environmental consultant or a chemist or something like that is $104 an hour, you're still in the 1970s. It's going to be a lot more expensive than that. It will probably be delayed in one form or another because this will engender a lot of litigation. A lot of the comments basically said, do you have an idea, government, of what it is you're requiring us to do, how expensive that's going to be, how time consuming that's going to be? Next slide, please, Melinda. Now, You're probably going to breathe a sigh of relief when you look at this, but wait. The two categories for significant contractors, they received total sum in federal contract obligations for the prior fiscal year between 7.5 million and $50 million. Major contractors, they received over $50 million in federal contract obligations for the prior fiscal year. Many of the comments said, government, you ought to multiply those by 10 because there's a lot of small businesses which will qualify at least as significant contractors. And there are still some small businesses, depending on their NAICS code, that'll qualify at 50 million. Remember, these apply to supply, services, R&D, construction, what have you. And there are some small businesses, they don't even look at revenue. They look at the number of employees. So a lot of the comments said, whoa, you got to raise that. This is going to hit a lot of small businesses. But notice that it's total sum in federal contract obligations for the prior fiscal year. So if you won a contract for $5 million in, say, FY 2024, oh yeah, that's a total sum that's in there. But if you got a change order on one of your other contracts that added $1 million to your contract, that goes added to it. If an option was exercised on one of your contracts, that goes into it. If you have an IDIQ, an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract, and you got task or delivery orders in FY24, those get added. So it's not just new contracts that go into that. Now, the proposed rule does not apply to contractors who received less than 7.5 million in federal contract obligations for the prior fiscal year. But let me emphasize that the FAR doesn't apply to those individuals. I'm going to come back to that. That doesn't prohibit other agencies like EPA, who wants to be purer than Caesar's wife in the environmental area, for requiring that at a lower amount. Now, the next page, please. There are exempt contractors, okay? Alaska Native corporations, community developed corporations, Indian tribes. They're still called Indian tribes. For some reason, Congress has never changed these rules down to the Buy Indian Act or the Indian Incentive Program. They're still called Indian, but so that's why I use it. Native Hawaiian organizations, tribally owned, higher education, nonprofit, state and local governments. The next to last one, entities deriving 80% or more of their annual revenue from federal management and operating contracts that are subject to agency annual site. That's primarily energy department. So if any of you do a lot of work at Hanford, at Idaho Falls, Los Alamos, you have an exemption. And then the last one is small business contractors, but notice there's an asterisk there. That is not as broad as you might think it is. Okay. Next slide, please, Melinda. Now, what's going to be required? This is very confusing. Okay. The affected contractors will have to deliver up to 3 items. A greenhouse gas inventory. That is just a listing of the types of greenhouse gases you emit. The carbon monoxide, the nitrous oxide, the nitrogen oxide, the methane, and all of the others that are in there. You just have to list the types that you emit. The annual climate disclosure, there you're going to have to disclose the amounts. Well, this many tons of this or particulates of this. And the third thing that affected contractors will have to disclose is science-based targets for the reduction of greenhouse gases. All these items we listed here, this is how we're going to reduce them. And I didn't just pick these out of the air. These are science-based targets in accordance with criteria going to be listed in the FAR. That last one is very, very expensive. Now, what are the types of emissions that we're talking about here? Scope 1, emissions from sources owned or controlled by the contractor. If the prime contractor owns its building, owns its trucks, owns its bulldozers, what have you, they have to disclose the emissions from those items. Okay? Scope 2, the emissions associated with generation of electricity, heating, cooling, and steam from sources not owned or controlled by the contractor. The regulation is going to have a separate category for those because very often a contractor, be it supply, services, what have you, has no choice in the matter. They've got to go to this particular electric utility or something like that. But then scope 3, emission, whoops, go back to the previous slide, Kay. It jumped for some reason. Emissions, emissions that are the, let me just read it to you. Emissions that are a consequence of the contractor's operation, but from sources, no, go the other direction, please. From the contractor's operation, but from sources not owned or controlled by the contractor. One more slide earlier. So what that's,
we've got some technical challenges. 1 second here.
okay,
I'm
no
sorry.
problem, no problem. Well, let me just explain that. From sources not owned or controlled, there you go, not owned or controlled by the contractor. This deals with subcontractors, okay? So the prime, be it a huge company, they have to disclose what are the emissions coming from sources not owned? Your employees' cars. You hired that trucking company to deliver these items to the customer or something like that. You have to disclose all of that to the government. Now, we digress from that for a moment. Here is where small businesses will get a bit of a break. If you are a small business, but you qualify, for example, as a significant contractor, you got between 7.5 million and 50 million last year, or a major contractor, over 50 million, you get some relief. You have to comply with delivering the greenhouse gas inventory. You do not have to comply with the science-based targets. It's just too expensive for you. It's unclear how much you are going to have to disclose of the annual climate disclosure. You probably will have to do something in SAM, the System for Award Management, but you won't have to put it on a publicly available website of your own. So you're still going to have to comply with at least number 1 and part of number 2. But what I think is most important here is remember the prime. Say the prime is Boeing, General Dynamics, or any other huge company, or any company that has to comply with these rules. Who are they going to pick as a subcontractor? I've got to hire somebody to transport my stuff, okay? Kay, oh my gosh, all of her stuff, all of her trucks are electric vehicles, tremendously efficient. Jackie, boy, all of her trucks just belch out smoke like there's no tomorrow. Who am I going to select, knowing that I'm going to have to disclose this to the government? They're going to go with the environmentally clean subcontractor. So remember that this is coming. So you will have to look at your carbon footprints in a very short period of time. Now, remember there at the bottom, major contractors must complete all 3 deliverables, scope 1, 2, and 3. Significant contractors need only complete the greenhouse inventory and the annual climate disclosure for 1 and 2, not the science-based targets. If you're a small business, small in your primary NAICS code, you don't have to worry about science-based targets at all, and you have some relief under the annual climate disclosure. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, that was just what's coming under Executive Order 14030. What's coming under Executive Order 14057? Again, this is the one that set the goals, and they wanted some goals in terms of net emission policy. By the way, if any of you deal with construction, one of the things they've said there, they want construction materials that embodied lower emissions, and they specifically said such as concrete and steel. So there's a special emphasis on construction. Now, I've got to update this slide. That second bullet, present status, the draft proposed rule was being reviewed. No longer being reviewed. The proposed rule was issued on August 3rd, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I guess. They said, this is the proposed rule. There is a 60-day comment period. It will end on October 2nd. Whenever that ends, then they will go about implementing this. So this could come up again anytime really after October. There is that's a typo. It should be CEQ. The Committee on Environmental Quality came out with instruction to the agencies in August of 2022. It's a 72-page document. So they're giving fairly detailed instructions. Some new important players, the Office of the Chief Federal Sustainability Officer. But I want to mention what I have there about agency-specific plans. Remember what I said. What I've been talking about is the changes to the FAR. Agencies are allowed to supplement the FAR. They can't contradict the FAR unless they get a deviation. EPA, it would be perfectly logical for EPA in this area to be purer than Caesar's wife and require more strenuous requirements. Energy Department would probably do that, okay? Those agencies or any agencies will probably add a mandatory evaluation factor when deciding whether someone gets a contract, be they large or small, not just technical merit, management merit, past performance, not just price, how big is your carbon footprint? So all of that is coming, okay? Next slide, please. Okay. The impact on subs and state and local procurements. I wanted to talk about this. The proposed rules, the proposed new FAR changes are not proposed as mandatory flow downs, like Ms. Como was talking about regarding FAR Part 19, okay? But any prime contractor would be crazy not to flow these things down, because remember what I talked about, they are going to have to disclose to the government the carbon footprints of their subcontractors and their employees who drive their private cars. So you're going to see this. The contractors will flow them down, not because the government mandates it, but because the government essentially puts the contractors in a box if they don't do this. Now, a lot of my clients, I'm pretty much retired now, but a lot of clients go, that's another reason why I'll never deal with the federal government. Too much trouble. You're trying to avoid the unavoidable. A lot of that $3.1 trillion that have been appropriated, it's not going to be on federal contracts. It'll be a grant to the Washington State Department of Transportation, the Idaho Department of Natural Resources or something. And it will result in state and local contracts, which will contain the same rules. Cooperative agreements. The government enters into a cooperative agreement with the University of Washington. A lot of these rules will flow down. And whenever the federal government comes out with a new rule States are free to adopt that. Washington State, for those of you who are here, is very environmentally conscious. It would not surprise me at all if the state goes, that's a good idea. Let's adopt this on all of our state and local contracts. Or maybe King County would do that. So the takeaway I want to give you for this course, and for this talk, and I wanted to save some time to talk about something else, Kay, unless you think I don't need to talk about the Ultima case. So just let me know.
Nope, I think you're doing great. So just keep on, sir.
Oh, okay. Takeaways. This is coming. Okay. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but it's coming. So be aware of it. Make sure your customers and the prime contractors, if you subcontract, are aware of it. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be uprooting, because a lot of contractors who are not ahead of the curve will find themselves ineligible for a lot of contracts. So keep your eye on what is coming out in FAR Part 23. If you don't look at WIFCON every day, www.wifcon.com, it stands for Where in Federal Contracting, please start doing that. It's free, okay? I check it every business day. The left-hand column will give all the new rules that are coming out, including new manuals. The federal DoD came out with a manual last October, a new manual on dealing with the accounting officers representatives. Very handy little document. Okay. www.wifcon, WIFCON. It stands for whereinfederalcontracting.com. Okay. The middle column is any new cases that have come out. You may not care about them unless you recognize the name. The next column is new news. Okay. They announced some new articles that have been published by individuals. And then there is a chat room. It's a wonderful chat room. A lot of the people who respond to it are professors from the Defense Acquisition University. So if you have a problem, something you've never confronted before, put it in there, and you will be amazed at the topics. Okay, now. Before we take it over for questions, I did want to mention something. I think Kay gave me the go-ahead. I want to talk about a case totally divorced from what I've just been talking about. The Ultima case came out of Tennessee on July 19th. It involved the 8A program. The 8A program has been around for 70 years. It creates a preference for members of disadvantaged classes to alleviate years or decades of discrimination. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans. The 8A program has been challenged for decades. This is race discrimination, should be thrown out. It has survived all of those challenges. But this case, the Ultima versus Department of Agriculture, a woman-owned small business was losing out a contract to an 8A firm. So the woman-owned small business filed a lawsuit claiming you can't do that. But they narrowed the focus. Instead of saying the 8A program is illegal, it's racial discrimination, their focus was the Small Business Administration has a rebuttable presumption. If you are a member of the Asian Pacific or Hispanic American, we're going to presume that you are disadvantaged. Now, they've always had the rule you can't be a multi-millionaire or so, but other than that, you are presumed to be disadvantaged. It was a rebuttable presumption so that other people who wanted to challenge that, they had the burden of proof. So that was what the lawsuit was all about. About a month or so ago, the Supreme Court came out with a decision in the Students for Fair Admissions to Harvard and University of North Carolina. And basically what the Supreme Court said was all of these race-based programs have to have a logical endpoint. There's, they can't go on forever. So the Supreme Court put a requirement that someone claiming privilege had to prove I am disadvantaged. Not that I am a member of Native Americans. I have to prove I'm disadvantaged. The federal judge in Tennessee relied on that case. He said that SBA regulation that affords to claimants a rebuttable presumption. If you're a Native American, we're going to presume you are disadvantaged. Did away with that. He issued a nationwide injunction against the SBA doing that. Now, this was on July 19th. On August 8th, the SBA announced that it was suspending new applications for the 8A program. I don't think, and this is just me talking, I don't think this will impact existing 8A firms. But for new firms wanting to enter the program, it's been suspended while the SBA reworks and revises its application questionnaire that people fill out to go into the program. Now, the judge has set August 31st for the parties to get together to talk about remedies. Now, the government can certainly move for reconsideration, or they can appeal to the Circuit Court of Appeals. But if you weren't aware of that case, it's Ultima versus the Department of Agriculture out of the Federal District Court in Tennessee. And even though it's Tennessee, the judge issued a nationwide injunction. It's kind of a big deal. So I wanted you to be aware of that. So with that, I think I certainly have left time for questions in case people want to ask questions about the environmental changes coming and or the Ultima case, but there's not a whole heck of a lot I can tell you about the Ultima case other than that explanation of what has happened already. I don't know if any other speaker today talked about the Ultima case.
So you are the first one to bring that up. And
Okay.
We've got a question in the chat.
Okay.
Saying Ultima versus who?
It was Ultima versus the Department of Agriculture. So it was an agriculture department contract, but obviously the SBA program was front and center in there. It was decided, it's a public case. It was decided July 19th. If you just Google Ultima, you should be able to come up with the decision fairly quickly. There was another quick question about what's the threshold to become a significant contractor. Remember, I pointed that out to you, somewhere between 7.5 million and 50 million, but it's the total sum of federal contract obligations in the previous fiscal year. Not just new awards, but options, change orders, delivery or task orders, okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions?
I've discovered that there's a real advantage to being the last speaker of the day. The number of questions shrinks mightily.
Well, I appreciate your sharing the information. The Department of Agriculture and the 8A issue, I've heard a few rumblings about it, but I think you've given more insight into it and a little bit more clearly explaining what's going on. And I appreciate that tremendously.
Yeah. I don't want to scare anyone. If you're already in the program, there's no indication it's going to impact you. But if other people are trying to get into the program, at the very least, the applications are suspended for a while the SBA and the government tries to figure out what to do.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let's see. We've got a note in here. It says, awesome presentation, Mr. Nagel.
Oh, good. Good.
Another one. Thank you. Very important and timely presentation. Our legal department has been discussing 52.204-8 for a while now.
Oh, okay. if you're not familiar with 5204, Part 4 of the FAR is administration. That's where they throw a lot of stuff in there that they're really not sure what else to do with. But for example, that's where they put in the recent FAR change on TikTok and bite dance thing. So FAR Part 4 is one of those parts of the FAR that sneaks by a lot of people.
It's right there between 3 and 5, right?
Yeah, yeah. 3 and then 3 is improper business practice. So you've always got to be aware of that.
There you go. I see a hand is raised. Miss Priscilla, would you like to unmute? Oops, we can't hear anything. Priscilla, do you want to type your question in the chat? We're not hearing anything.
Yeah, she has permission to speak.
It's not.
Oh, there she is.
Okay, there.
Yeah.
My goodness, I was clicking and clicking. Pardon me. So this is, I don't know if it's a question, but I'm going to put it out there. Thank you so much, Jim. That was an awesome presentation. You know, the moment the more we talk about this case that is being making its way through the channels regarding no longer having a presumption of social disadvantage simply because you're one of the 5 minority groups. My concern is just as in the Pena case, it will result somehow in a spillover of not having a presumption that there should be certain classes of socioeconomic classes that qualify as disadvantaged in government small business programs in general. Now that is that would be an awful thing to happen. And I think the reality of that actually transpiring to that degree is, you know, it's probably lower than 30%, but between now and sometime in the future, I can definitely see more challenges being made to the overarching programs in and of themselves, like the economically disadvantaged women-owned small business programs and such. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the Pena case that Priscilla mentioned is an older case. It arose out of when Federico Pena, long before he became the federal Secretary of Transportation and the Secretary of Energy, when he was mayor of Denver, the 8A program, or the equivalent of 8A at the state level, somebody protested saying that's racial discrimination. He wanted to have the whole program thrown out as unconstitutional. And that would have certainly spilled over to the federal 8A program. It got all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did not do that. They said, we'll look at this carefully, but ultimately it was upheld. So that was the biggest challenge, but the challenges have never stopped on the 8A program. So right now, the ultimate case there is on the books. I agree with everything you said, Priscilla. I think this is the harbinger, and not just the ultimate case. There's certainly the previous case by the Supreme Court about race-based admissions to Harvard or University of North Carolina. And remember, the plaintiffs sought that because Harvard's a private university, University of North Carolina was public, so they would cover the waterfront. I suspect that we're going to see an awful lot of cases like this for the foreseeable future, chipping away not just at the 8A program, but every program at a state or local level about that. So it's good news for lawyers. I mean, lawyers who specialize in that area of the law will be having a lot of business. But boy, it is going to be a very uncertain time, not just for those 8A firms themselves, but every contractor. You know, my gosh, who can I subcontract with or something like that? So I don't have any great insights other than to agree fully with what you said, Priscilla.
Here, I've got
Thank
a
you.
question for you.
Okay.
From James Bland. A few government project managers have concerns about pursuing an 8A strategy under the current environment. Concern is the potential exposure risk of a protest that could impact the acquisition timelines and execution of the contract project requirement. Question: is this a valid concern from your point of view?
I don't think so. And again, I'm just giving my 2 cents. A protest. First of all, people can always protest. If they go to the GAO, I don't think GAO will really touch that. That's going to be up to the federal courts. If they protested at the Court of Federal Claims, again, I think the Court of Federal Claims would be a little reluctant to go into this area. And I don't think they would really overturn the apple cart. So it's a concern. Yes, I agree with that. I don't think I would lose a lot of sleep over that if I were a federal contracting officer. The program is valid today. It's suspended for new applicants, but it's valid for people already in the program. And I think regardless of any judge that it goes before, I think they would realize if we upset the existing contract structure, all we're doing is shooting ourselves in the foot. So even if something monumental would have happened, I think any prudent judge would say, okay, any solicitations issued or contracts awarded after this date, don't award to 8A firms or subcontract 8A firms. But I don't think it would upset the apple cart to existing contracts. Hopefully everyone understood that. I hope I was clear.
Thank you. I understood what you were saying.
Oh, okay.
We got some thumbs up. We got some thumbs up. So we
Okay.
must.
Yeah. I would not worry about that very much at all.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. I am seeing thumbs up coming up though.
Okay. Well, I
So,
finished, I think, 10 minutes early. So maybe you guys can get out early on what, at least here in the Seattle area, is a blisteringly hot day.
well, sir, it is always a pleasure to have you participating. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
No
I
problem.
truly appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, the sunlight is so great you can hardly see me anymore. My heavenly days. Okay. Okay.
Well, it's that Seattle sunlight, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, guys, have a good rest of the day and hope you learned a lot today.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, anytime, guys. Take it easy,
All
Kate.
right.
Take it easy, Melinda.
Absolutely. So for a quick wrap up, first off, thank you to everyone who joined us today. It's wonderful to see the attendance continue strong, even in a virtual format. And I'm really excited, for those who may not have heard earlier, I'm really excited that we're going to plan for an in-person event the week that we have the Alliance event in Tacoma. So please put it into your travel schedule, your budget, that you'll come on out for a day's training live and in person. Location is still to be determined, but we will keep you posted as we learn more. Also, want to make sure that we remind everyone that is interested, if you're DoD and or federal government and or industry and interested in being part, I think that covers everyone, doesn't it? Interested in being part of the regional council, please reach out and let us know. We're just about ready to come up for elections again. And absolutely, there's opportunities for other people to take the reins and lead the council. So look forward to seeing who wants to step into different positions. And let's see, anything else I need to wrap up other than saying thank you so very much. We will get some certificates out and we will see what we can do about issuing the certificates for 3.5 hours for continuous learning. I think we could all agree that we've learned a few things today. I greatly enjoyed each of the presentations and I found them all very informative. I want to thank my team, my board again. David Walls, our secretary, James Glenn, our treasurer, Mike Gilbert, our co-chair, and then our other parts of our team that make this thing happen here. Ms. Jackie Hacker, Ms. Melinda, Ms. Mary Jo, Mr. Jeremy, Ms. Vanessa. These people are absolutely instrumental in helping us have a successful event. So thank you to each and every one of you. We wish you all a wonderful fourth quarter, and you'll be getting information as well as a link to the current small business desk guide for your use and for you to share with other small business professionals. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Kay.